$60 savings. Valid 12/19 through 12/25 while supplies last. Selections vary by location.
It's Jon and Jim, MLB players on the move. With all the deals, is it time for AJ Preller to get busy?
I'm excited about it.
Or continue to wait for Sasaki? Plus, the Aztecs make a statement against Cal.
Nick, got to pull up the three on the near wing. Good! Back-to-back threes. How about them boys? Here come them Aztecs.
Can Brian Dutcher and the Scarlet and Black maintain the momentum? Now, time for Jon and Jim.
All right, San Diego and Southern California, what's going on? Hour one, Jon and Jim with you for the next 4 hours without Jim, who had a bit of a crazy travel weekend. It is the holidays. Like, have you experienced any craziness over the last couple of days? Yeah, he did. I'll share it with you in a minute. So you got Jon and Brent. We have a really good show. We'll have 4 guests for you over the next 4 hours. Paul Garrison will join us coming up at 2:30. Aztecs have been very busy in the transfer portal adding quarterback. So Paul will join us later this hour. Bernie Wilson on the passing of Ricky Henderson, a former Padre. He will join us coming up at 4 p.m. Chris Hodge has been great for our listeners with his free NFL and college picks. We'll have a Monday Night Football pick for you tonight and more. He'll join us at 4:30. Then Mark Ziegler, speaking of crazy travel weekends, we'll get into the Aztecs momentarily, but he'll join us coming up at 5:30. What has your travel been like over the last couple of days? What are your plans for the holidays? We can read some of your texts. 70470, start it with the word team. Again, 70470, start it with the word team. So I was away this past week out east, visiting my mom, seeing family, and I was one of the fortunate ones because I got out before the fog that was impacting San Diego International. And then I got back late last night, and the airport was still a little bit crazy, but it didn't really impact me. But I was texting back and forth with Jim, and we'll get into the Aztecs in a second, because if you don't know the story about San Diego State men's basketball, then we'll tell you the story about San Diego State men's basketball. You know the story, Brent. Obviously, it's played out over the last 24 hours. But so it was easy for me, and I was one of the lucky ones. Jim went east with Aaron on Saturday, and all he did, Brent, was text me every 20 minutes. Like, airport's a nightmare. Oh, my gosh. This was such a long... You know, Jim, everything is such a production for him. He made it.
What was the shock?
Yeah, exactly. He knew that this was going to be the case. He's away for a week. He made it there safely, which at the end of the day is all that matters. Now, he was traveling with Erin and her dog, and then they were driving from Charlotte to Myrtle Beach. It was a production, but he made it. But the Aztecs, so it's amazing. So I'm out east, and I'm following the story from afar, right? I never miss any Aztec game, but I was away this past weekend visiting my mom. And they were on the road. So Fletch did pre-half and post. Of course, Brent's back here in the studio. Ted's on the call. And I start following the story. And Mark Ziegler is going to join us coming up at 5:30. I'm not going to explain all the travel nightmare issues that they dealt with. I'll let Brian Dutcher do it post-game. They ran through Cal in San Jose. They led by 29 at one point. They comfortably win by 21 points. They move up in the metrics. They're through their non-conference schedule. They're playing incredible basketball. And we'll get into, by the way, the Padres having a new chairman coming up momentarily in Peter Seidler's brother, Jon Seidler, and what that means for the Padres. But before we get to that, with this being a travel week, with this being the holidays, this is what it was like for the Aztecs, who didn't even know if they were going to make it for the game on Saturday. This was Brian Dutcher postgame on their planes, trains, automobiles experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've had bosses in the past that they'd be hard to deal with if flights were late or hotel rooms weren't ready, and I'm not one of those guys. So it doesn't bother me. Yeah, I know it happens to everybody. I was sitting at the San Diego airport, and I was one of 200,000 people that couldn't get to where they wanted to go. So we were supposed to fly out yesterday at 4:40, canceled. We drove up to Orange County to try to fly out of Orange County Airport because our assistant Ryan Battercelli, who worked at Irvine, told me it's never foggy in Irvine, and it was so foggy I couldn't see anything. But I kept them. I didn't fire them. And then we got that flight canceled. We were just finishing breakfast at 8:30 in the morning. And then we hustled and got on the phone and found there was a flight out of Ontario with 18 seats left to San Jose. So we rushed over to Ontario. We took Ubers to Ontario, and we got 18 guys on the plane, the players, coaches, trainer, and strength coach, and then administrators, grad assistants, another assistant coach, walk-ons, guys that weren't playing. Took a 7.5-hour bus ride to be here just for tip-off. So it wasn't the most ideal travel, but it happens to everybody. And even though we're in sports and we tried to find a charter too, we couldn't find a charter. And so we're just like everybody at this time of the year. Travel's hard, and it was hard on us.
So Mark Ziegler is going to join us coming up at 5:30 because he's written about the fact that the Aztecs really don't charter as much as most programs, that are in like the top 25 routinely. Although you could certainly argue whether they've necessarily needed to or not. I mean, they're winning at this ridiculous clip. They had half their traveling party, as Dutch said there, essentially show up at tip time, and they blew the doors off Cal. Slow start for 5 minutes. Then they outscored Cal at one point, I think 67-30 in the game, end up winning, going away 71-50. And it is part of, listen, travel happens, even if you had a charter. And we'll talk to Mark Ziegler about that coming up at 5:30. I don't know what the charter really does if there's fog. But they somehow made it. They won the game. It's the holidays. They have a huge game, by the way, coming up Saturday against Utah State. You can hear it right here on San Diego Sports 760 at 3 p.m. A couple of teams at the top of the Mountain West Conference in the metrics will meet Saturday at 3 p.m. You can hear it again here. Pregame coverage will begin at 2 p.m. The other story from the weekend, and there's a lot to get into. There's a lot to react to, and we will. But the Padres do have a new chairman, as Eric Katsenda's tenure is only going to be about a year, which I think was the initial plan when we learned that Peter Seider had passed away, unfortunately, untimely a year ago. And Eric Katsenda, his longtime business partner, took over for a year. They lowered payroll. They may have done so either way. And now we find out about a year later that Jon Seider, the brother of Peter Seider, will take over as chairman. But this really doesn't change the trajectory of where the Padres are going. The Peter Seider days are not coming back in terms of the freedom to spend, right? Like that version of the Padres has likely come and gone, even though you're going to get the chairman with the same last name as Peter Seider and Jon Seider. But this is what Kevin Acee wrote over the weekend. He broke the story. And Kevin said that transition to what they believe is a more sustainable way of operating in a smaller market is expected to continue with Jon Seider in charge. And then Dennis Lin this weekend said, this offseason has brought more financial restraint. The Padres, before making an addition to the Major League roster, are carrying a projected payroll roughly $40 million higher than it was at the end of the 2024 season. They also are estimated to be over the luxury tax threshold. And like they were last winter with Juan Soto, the Padres have been willing to listen to trade offers for pricier veterans, including Dylan Cease, Luis Arraez, and Jay Cronenworth. So you know that experience, Brent, sometimes with brands where you're like, oh, this is great. Like M&M is bringing back the red M&M. I always go to that for some reason. Or, oh, Sports Illustrated is coming back. But things have changed. Like you can't really go back in time. And yeah, you're going to have the commitment and the continuity of the Seider family. I think that makes people feel good. Hey, there's a Seider that's in charge, but it's not going to be the free spending Seiders because, again, they don't have the TV money. Their budgets have come down. And I don't think all of a sudden, because Jon Seider's in charge, all of a sudden they're going to go back to their top three spending ways of like 2021 and 2022.
When you said that the spending era is over, the first thing that just popped in my head was kind of like how, whenever people talk about the 80s, how, everyone just spent money in the 80s and, because everyone had money because of the boom, and just the era of 80s spending is done. It's like you said, that's not going to happen again. They're going to be a little more frugal, I guess would be a nice way to put it, with their dollars, to where they're not just going to just write blank checks anymore.
I'll give you an example. This has always stuck with me. Ted Leitner, right? Who you heard this past weekend. He made it to San Jose with the team, and he'll be on the call Saturday in his final year calling Aztec basketball games, right? Did Padres, has done Aztecs, did Chargers, did Clippers, iconic, right? 40 years in the market. Something he has said, it's like he worked in radio when radio was radio. Like you pick up a newspaper at home. It's not necessarily the same paper as it once was, right? Like if you grew up in Milwaukee, the paper doesn't have the same circulation. Like it's not the same. Like the Washington Post isn't the same paper it was in 1985. Media changes. Things evolve. Now, there's good and bad that comes with that, right? That doesn't mean that radio isn't fully what it used to be, but it's not what it was before the internet, right? Like before the internet, newspapers had a certain credibility to them, right? Before social media, you relied on internet news sites, and now there's social media and so on and so forth. Shoot, Facebook isn't Facebook to some people that had Facebook 20 years ago, or MySpace isn't MySpace to people that use MySpace 25 years ago. The point is you have to adapt. You have to evolve. It's a part of life. It's a part of business. It's a part of sports. I don't know what it means for the Padres. I mean, I'm left to consider this fact. Yes, they're back to John Seidler, who's in charge. It was Eric Etzenda. Obviously, Peter Seidler, those days of spending, I think, are over. And again, the actions speak louder than words. You look around baseball, what's going on? You see Sean Manaea signing 3-year, $75 million deal. You see all these moves. You see Walker Buehler signing for over $20 million today. I mean, the Padres haven't made moves, and you have to ask yourself this question. Why? They will make moves, and A.J. Preller is very creative and very aggressive. But are they waiting on Roki Sasaki? Are they waiting to finalize a budget? I tend to believe what Kevin Acee has told us on the air, what Dennis Lin has written about, which is they're kind of in a tough spot, a lot like they were a year ago. Now they traded Juan Soto. Everything worked out. They won 93 games. What are they going to do this time around? Are they going to trade Dylan Cease? Are they going to add a cost-effective Roki Sasaki, which would be terrific? Will they part ways with Luis Ariz? Can they find a trade partner for Jay Cronenworth? But, listen, they can change chairpersons and they can have similar last names and they can say whatever they want to say, but it's Christmas. They're going to make moves. They're going to field all their positions. They're going to have their 26-man roster. They're going to believe they can make the postseason. But, again, the actions are they haven't really had many actions, and I think that speaks to the overall issues they've been dealing with now for a year plus, Brent, which is that they don't have the same amount of money that they had 2 years ago when Peter was here.
Yeah, people just have to get used to it. They'll still survive. Just because you spend money doesn't automatically equate to that you're going to win anything.
Sure.
Look at Tampa.
Right.
Tampa never spends money, and they're still at least competitive. And they don't spend money on their stadium. They don't spend their money on anything really, but they're still competitive. So, and look how many years the Cubs dump money into teams and they didn't do anything with it. And the Yankees do it all the time. It hasn't brought them anywhere championships. So just because you spend money doesn't mean that you automatically are going to win. And just because you don't spend money doesn't mean you're automatically going to lose.
I think it's a really good point. I think you could tie it back to San Diego State men's basketball specifically. Maybe they don't charter like Syracuse. They've won at a higher level than Syracuse over the last 10 years. Maybe they don't have the same NIL money as the University of North Carolina right now, but they've won at a comparable clip to UNC here over the last couple of years. You get the overall point. You have to make more sometimes with less. And sometimes when you don't have that blank check, when you have to really hone in, that allows you to perform at a high level. I use A.J. Preller's 2024 as a good example. Maybe in 2022 and 2023, Brian, he had that, throw caution to the wind, blank check. If it doesn't work out, we can try with another check. Well, he knew he had to be close to perfect a year ago, and he was able to navigate a roster considering those circumstances. The question now is, can he do it time and time again with the budget constraints? So we'll talk about that on the other side. Also, what's going around right now in baseball, specifically over the last 24 hours and how it impacts the Padres. And Paul Garrison from the East Village Times. The Aztecs have added not just one transfer portal quarterback, but two over the last week. So Paul Garrison from the East Village Times with the impact of the portal on San Diego State football. He'll join us at 2:30. We are just getting started. Happy holidays. We're here until 6 p.m. It's Jon and Jim. I like it. Hollow Music. You can hit us up on the Talkback mic. Just open the free iHeartRadio app. Look for San Diego Sports 760. Tap that little microphone icon next to the play button. Leave a 30-second talkback. Harrison, East Village Times will join us coming up at 2:30. The Aztecs, Sean Lewis, very busy in the portal. We've got a great show for you. Over the next 4 hours, Mark Ziegler will join us at 5 o'clock hour. More on the Aztecs, who picked up that big win against Cal and San Jose, have a huge game against Utah State on Saturday. Chris Hodge has free picks for us coming up at 4:30. Bernie Wilson on Ricky Henderson's, not just national and baseball legacy, but his local legacy here in San Diego. I think he's remembered, obviously, across the sport more for his time in Oakland. And we could get to it right here. And I was just going to say that, back to the point that we started the show on with, again, the Padres make a change in chairman from Eric Etzenda to John Seidler. But at the end of the day, I don't think anything of significance is really going to change in the extreme short term. We'll see about that, because you look at what's going on right now around baseball, and within like the last day, Sean Manaea is $75 million. Yeah, Sean Manaea. That's right. The guy that couldn't get out at the end of his time in San Diego, 3 years, $75 million to the Mets. Okay. Jock Peterson to the Rangers, big deal. 2 years, $37 million. Walker Buehler, $21 million to the Red Sox. And then there's the Padres, who we just are waiting on. And are we waiting for Roki Sasaki? Are we waiting for a change in chairman? Are we waiting for them to make a trade because they need to get under some CBT threshold? Whatever it is, we're waiting right now on the Padres. But back to Henderson for a moment. I mean, if you're our age, that's me and Brent, we're in our 40s. I think even if you're Jim's age, I think if you're mid-30s or older, and honestly 40s, because the heyday from Ricky Henderson was not the late 90s, right? The heyday was well before that.
80s, yeah.
And I mean, there's just never been a guy like him. We can pretend like this 50-50 accomplishment is truly unique, the one that Ohtani's just had. Not to really make fun of Ohtani in the spot, but I mean, you want to talk about something that was never done and truly unique. The old rules with the same size bases, with no throw over restrictions, and you're stealing 130 bases. And you look at his overall stolen base number, and first of all, he got on base 40% of the time for his entire career, which nobody does. And then he stole it for 1,400 bases. The second most in the history of the game are like 500 less than that. This isn't like, hey, I've got the home run record and I've hit one more home run than second place, or I've got the RBI record, or I hit 338, but someone else hit 337, and so on and so forth. He blew the doors off these stolen base records. They'll never be touched again. There's never been anyone like him. There never will be anyone like him again. We saw him for a brief period of time, a couple of years, obviously, in San Diego and a couple of stints. But if you're in your 40s or older and you think about Ricky Henderson, you're thinking about one of the great players you ever watched, either live or on television. That's how I view Ricky Henderson.
My lasting image of Ricky was when he broke the stolen base record, and he ripped the base right out of the dirt and just held it up over his head. And, there wasn't he wasn't a jerk about it or anything, but, most guys now when they hit an award, it's like they're all gracious and they wave like they're, the homecoming queen or something, and they're all nice. Not Ricky. Ricky just ripped that thing out of the dirt and just held it up. And, we're talking with Mike Usher during the commercial break about how, he was like the first athlete to refer to himself in like the third person.
Right. Yeah.
The Rock does that all the time now and gets credit for it, but Ricky Henderson did it all the time. He always referred to himself as the Ricky, and, always talked about himself in third person. But yeah, most people think of McGuire and Canseco, but you have to remember he was batting leadoff for all those guys.
Yeah, I mean, it was you even just,
and he hit home runs too. It wasn't just
a
lot of these guys. It's like, oh, okay, you can steal bases and then you hit for contact because you have no power. But I think he had a record for like leadoff home runs, something like that too.
Absolutely, yeah, I that is accurate. Most stolen bases in a single season, obviously. Oldest player in the history of baseball to lead a league in steals. I think he was like 40 or 39 when he had 66 steals. So, I mean, he was a one of one is the point. And also he's from an era. We talked earlier about like, you can't go back necessarily. Like things change. Business changes. The Peter Seidler owning the Padres days, they're over. That free spending, that spending prowess, that top three spender in baseball, those days are over. I'd be very skeptical to imagine that the Padres will ever be a top three spender again in the sport. But you can look at Ricky Henderson. It was more of a national game when he was in it in the 80s. You had World Series games on, like the CBSs and the NBCs,
ABC
and you had day games in the World Series, and it was just Sunday Night Baseball resonated more, and the viewership numbers were higher, and it was before the NFL completely dominated everyone's life. I mean, I think the NFL was already the NFL in the 80s, but it's only gotten bigger since the 80s, and Major League Baseball has only gotten smaller nationally and resonating more locally. So when you think about Ricky Henderson, like we say this right now with baseball, like what player in baseball resonates with sports fans nationwide and maybe internationally? It's Shohei Ohtani, right? It's hard to say that Mike Trout resonates in the same regard as Shohei Ohtani, or even like Manny Machado, I think is very polarizing. And there's a lot of people that love Manny Machado here locally, but there's a lot of people nationally that hate him. And when the Padres are playing, he trends often, even if it's in the regular season. But you go back, 20 or 30 years, and Ricky Henderson was more of a national sports star. And I'm not saying it was to the same level as like an NFL star. I'm not saying it was necessarily to the level of like Bo Jackson or, I just don't know, but it was different. Like when you think about baseball players from the 80s or even the 90s, to your point, the McGuires, the Sosas, the Cansecos, right? That type of player. There used to be 3, 5, 7, 10 of that type of player. 1980s, rattle off the names. 1990s, rattle off the names. I think the 2020s, yeah, if you're a baseball fan, it's going to resonate. But I think when you all of a sudden, turn it over to like a sports fan, the list gets pretty short. Like you're talking about Shohei Ohtani. I don't think Mike Trout really resonates. I don't know if Manny Machado necessarily resonates nationwide. I think he does with some sports fans, but it just feels like baseball of the 1980s was a lot different in terms of the way it was covered and consumed and the way people treated it to baseball of today, if that makes sense.
Well, and it was still one of the top 3 big dogs then too, though. The NFL was huge, but it wasn't anywhere close to what it was or what it is now. College sports wasn't anywhere close to what it is now. UFC didn't even exist. Boxing was still, an actual thing that people watched still in the 80s. And, they're just, it's kind of like, the cable TV argument, back in the 80s compared to now, you didn't have as many options back then. And it's kind of the same thing with this. Back then, you just didn't have as many options.
All right, let's catch up with Paul Garrison. We'll switch gears. San Diego State football, a couple of huge additions via the transfer portal at the quarterback position. We'll get into it in more detail with Paul Garrison, who covers San Diego State for the East Village Times. Much more on Ricky Henderson's local legacy with Bernie Wilson from the AP at 4 p.m. It's Jon and Jim.
This report is sponsored by Progressive Insurance. The Lakers are back at it tonight as they host Detroit. Pregame starts at 7:15 with a tip right after 7:30. You can hear the game, of course, right here on San Diego Sports 760. In Major League Baseball free agency news, Walker Buehler inked a one-year deal with the Red Sox today worth $21 million. And Week 16 in the NFL wraps up tonight on Monday Night Football when the Saints go on the road to Lambeau to take on Jordan Love and the Packers. Progressive Insurance offers a great price and around-the-clock protection when bundling home and auto. It's one of those rare times when you could save money and get something great. Bundle now at Progressive.com. That's Progressive.com.
Jon and Jim back with you. There really is not an offseason in college football or basketball currently because of the nature of essentially free agency. I mean, the transfer portal opens, every player becomes a free agent, and the work begins at that point. And you have aspects going into the portal. You have new players joining San Diego State this offseason as well. Paul Garrison does a great job. He's been covering some of the recruiting visits that San Diego State has had over the last couple of weeks and some of these additions that they've made. Paul Garrison with the East Village Times back with us right now on Jon and Jim. So, Paul, first of all, thank you and happy holidays. And I want to start with the quarterbacks because there's so much, obviously, interest and intrigue, especially in Sean Lewis's offense, and it all starts at quarterback. So they've made a couple of additions. Let's start with Jaden Denegal, who transfers from the University of Michigan. Now, he's a Southern California guy. He's a dual threat option. He played a little bit during their national championship season 2 years ago. He didn't play at all in 2024. What do we know about Denegal and how he potentially fits in well for what Sean Lewis wants to do?
Well, happy holidays. Yeah, with Denegal, I think, everything that you said is spot on. There's a little bit of just the unknown because he hasn't played a lot of college snaps. But he was an unbelievable prep guy. He's huge. I think the way that he fits is, he has the ability to make every throw that Sean Lewis would want in his offense. I mean, it's a guy who, as they're looking to stretch the field vertically, stretch it horizontally, should be able to do that incredibly well. And I think the other piece of it is he's a little bit of a dual threat. I think definitely his arm is better than his legs, but I think the defenses are going to have to take him seriously as far as how he's going to be able to run the football. And I think the other real big positive is he's old. He's been around a college football program for many years, going to be an upperclassman. And I think that bodes well for, just his ability to kind of hit the ground running and make a big impression in fall camp.
So you have Denegal from Michigan, and then you have Bert Emanuel Jr., who we saw at Central Michigan this year, the son of a longtime NFL player. We've joked with Jim about Bert Emanuel. Jim has no idea who Bert Emanuel is. I'm like, Jim, you don't know football. But anyway, his son, Bert Emanuel Jr., is a really talented kid. Now, he's dealt with injuries. They haven't necessarily solely used him at quarterback, but he has played some quarterback at CMU. What can you tell us about his skill set and how he may fit in?
I think the part with him is that, you mentioned the limited opportunities that he had at Central Michigan. But what he did with those limited opportunities is nothing short of spectacular. Sean Lewis would talk about, how important it is to try to get explosive plays. And that's all that Bert Emanuel has done, in covering the Central Michigan San Diego State game. All the fans and the media up there, they wanted him to play and be the starter in that game and get all the stuff, all of the snaps, and not Joe Lavis, who ended up being the quarterback that led Central Michigan to a win there. But it's just somebody who brings explosive plays. I think the way he fits into the offense is very similar, obviously, to Jaden Denegal, just because you are looking for somebody who can force the defense to have to account for the QB in the run game. Somebody who, if given a little bit of space, can turn something that should be small, that most QBs would make a small gain, into a big one. I think that you look at some of the passing numbers, and I think with the way that the offense is and the offense runs, I think that they can coach these guys into having, a higher completion percentage. In the case of Emmanuel, and that we've seen in college so far, through, the screen games or, quick reads and things of that nature. So they're very similar. I think that again, he's another guy who is very big, and I think he can handle kind of that beating that he's taken or going to take in any system. And it's an exciting day, an exciting time. When you're looking at what they're going to do.
It's interesting comparing the quarterback from 2024 to 2025, and that's probably not completely fair. In 2025, but you do have probably a little more college experience in there, although they had some of that in 2024 as well. Of course, Danny O'Neal was the one that made a lion's share of the starts for Sean Lewis. All right, Paul Garrison, East Coast Times, is with us right now. Speaking of 2024 2025, how would you compare their emphasis right now on bolstering line play compared to what they did last offseason in the portal? It feels like there's been a huge emphasis on the offensive and defensive lines, and even like tight ends, blocking tight ends that they've added here in the last few days as well.
Yeah, I think where San Diego State is in kind of the stratosphere of college football. I think the portal is never going to be a net positive for them. Players current roster last offseason was coming in for the first time. A lot of those starters left and went to Power Five conferences and things of that nature. And a lot of that offensive line that they lost a lot of players. Brent Henderson in Florida, Kate Bennett goes to TCU, even coming there with the backup, UC Davis, and then others in the league that they were able to replace. They weren't quite as good as the guys they lost. This year, they've done a good job to keep their guys in house, and so now the players that are true, they're not necessarily guys that you're just bringing in to replace. And so I think there has been that emphasis, and they're looking for competitive depth. And I think that you look at kind of the versatility of the guys that they brought in, especially at the offensive line, play kind of guard or tackle position. Defensive line is pretty much coming back. With the new ruling with JC guys, I think that would probably potentially give a guy like Tupu Alualu another year of eligibility because he played time in the JC, and what that looked like for him and where he would want to continue his career is a question that is just being asked today with the NCAA's ruling. But I think that overall, not only are these guys a year older who was able to stay in the system, but they're now able to supplement those guys and not necessarily have to replace them. And I think that's a huge difference between the 2 years.
Yeah, that's really good insight. Paul Garrison, East Village Times, with us right now on Jon and Jim. I don't know the right word here. I don't think exploit is the word I'm looking for, but I think it makes sense in this context, which is like, how is the staff exploiting their Southern California location on the recruiting trail, specifically in the portal? Because I see someone like Christian Washington, who starred at Helix, and we talked about Jaden Danigal, who's out of Southern California, not San Diego, but Los Angeles area. How much of an advantage is that, so to speak, that they can cast that wide net of players that may have left for other pastures, but they can come back home within that 100-mile radius?
Yeah, I think you look at a lot of these guys and going and looking in that Southern California, as you described, is exactly what they're trying to be able to do. And I think, as we've talked about with the transfer portal, with NIL, it kind of, it changes the way I think relationships are built in college football, and it makes it to less of an amateur sport, and it makes it more of kind of that professional, this is about business, which I think has the other effect of making, the people that you really know and that can count on kind of shine a little bit brighter. And I think these kids really want to be closer to their family, want to be closer to their community, their support networks. Those, maybe they could, in years past, they could find that in other spots because they were forced to be in one place for a long period of time. And, not only are kids choosing to transfer out, but schools are saying, like, you haven't made enough progress, so you need to go find somewhere else as well. And so you kind of have a little bit of that distrust, I think, that's there, and a little bit of more of that business-like mentality at the school itself. And so I think the opportunity to play in front of the people that really support you is really good. And I think it's incredibly smart for the Aztecs not only to reach out to guys that are going to be close and maybe be able to tap into that, but everything is about money, and everything is about the price of scholarships. And if you can get guys that are in state versus out of state, and being able to do all of that, I think it just is a win-win for everybody. And the staff has seemed to be doing a good job of targeting those guys that are close to the campus and trying to make them Aztecs.
Paul, before you go, because I believe you've written on this, but what's the impact of the new DC, the defensive coordinator change from Eric Schmidt to Rob Orge? What's that impact in your opinion?
It obviously remains to be seen, but in my opinion, I think it's a great hire. I think you can look at a lot of different factors. Obviously, Rob Orge did a great job in Idaho in taking them from, being I heard the interview you guys had with him. He talked about the same thing, like taking a defense that had given up over 30 points a game all the way down to 20 in 2 years. There's a lot of things to point to, but I think for me, the part of it that I find the most interesting and the most fascinating is how he was the choice of the players on the defense. And, that Trey White and Chris Johnson and Tana Latuli, like they made their voice known inside of the Fowler Athletic Center, that they wanted Rob Orge to be the guy to be hired. And I think that when I asked Rob Arch about it, he talked about keeping that close to his heart and his appreciation for these guys, for them doing that and stepping up in that regard. And I think that the work that they're doing is they're kind of working to prove each other correct. That not only that the faith that the players had in Rob Orge, that he's going to be able to coach in a way that's going to show that they were right, but the players are going to try to prove with their play that they made the right decision as well. And I think that intangible of just working a little bit harder and kind of putting themselves on the line for each other, I think can make a really positive and a big impact. And I think the other part of it that's really important is they're not starting from scratch in year 2 with the system. Rob Orch saw everything that Eric Schmidt did, and he's able to build off it as opposed to laying a brand new foundation.
Paul, really appreciate it, man. Thank you for all your insight for our listeners over the last year plus here as we've reached the holiday season, and with Christmas and New Year's coming, I'm sure we'll catch up early in 2025. But I've really enjoyed having you on throughout the course of the year and previous years, and looking forward to doing it again coming up in 2025. So Merry Christmas and thank you, Paul.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and you're the man. Thank you.
I appreciate you, Paul. Paul Garrison, East Village Times. If you're an Aztec fan, you're not following Paul Garrison, you really should be throughout social media. He does a terrific job covering Aztec athletics. All right. I promised you that we were going to add a new segment. Now, we haven't really added any sound or anything, but I'm going to debut a brand new segment without Jim on the other side. With Jim in North Carolina, it's a perfect time to debut this brand new segment. We'll do it next. Do not go anywhere. It's Jon and Jim. Speaking of the brand new iHeartRadio app, if you haven't checked it out, now is the time. New features for 2025. If you've been relying on the app before, you'll rely on it more in 2025. If it's not yet available to you, it will be soon. Check the App Store, download the app. You can listen to Jon and Jim, San Diego Sports 760, and any of your favorite iHeartRadio stations here in San Diego and nationwide. So if you haven't grabbed it, make sure to grab it. It is available or will be available in the App Store.
I like the new preset.
I can't hear you.
I know the part of Jim today is me. I have to turn my mic on. I like the new preset feature that they have.
Okay, yes. Brand new preset feature in the app.
I used to always think it was annoying when I would have to go through and search like whatever station I wanted to listen to. Now I just push a button on the top and have presets in there. And, I've been in radio for over 23 years. So now I can have pretty much all my presets or every station I've ever worked for now is just all at the top.
Yeah,
so
they're going to make it more like your radio.
My favorite new thing.
Yeah, they're going to make it more like your radio dial. So if you haven't downloaded the new app, now is the time. Search for the iHeartRadio app in the App Store. All right, so every single day that we do, maybe you do, maybe you don't know this, that every single day at the end of the show, essentially, we do a Jim's Back page, and I've relentlessly made fun of it for the better part of the last 3 years, but it carries on. And there's some good, bad, and ugly that comes with Jim's Back page. Basically, it's him talking about space or Wendy's value meals and why chicken nuggets are now
crumble
back.
Cookies now.
Yeah, so, it's Jim. So it is what it is because Jim does it each and every day, and you either love it or you hate it, but hopefully you've heard it. Well, I figured if Jim's doing this every single day and, it is what it is, I feel like I can do something similar with, if we're doing Jim's back page, why can't I do John's front page? Now, some have said, I think Brent included, well, is the front page going to be like front page news? I'm like, no, it's just going to be like sports according to Jon. And then we talked about like John-isms. Or like things that Jon likes, I think we said.
Yeah, I liked John-isms.
Yeah, so this is more John-isms than Jon's front page. We have no fancy open or feature or jingle for it yet. We should have it at some point by 2026. I can't promise 2025. But here's where I want to go with it today for just a couple of minutes. And there's no better day to do this than with Jim not here because he wouldn't listen to me anyway, and I don't really care what he has to say about it. But there's been so much discussion about how the expanded college football playoff is broken and why did they expand it? And if you watch the opening round, they were all blowouts and the committee got it wrong. And why not just go back to 4 teams? And I completely disagree with that. I think people fought for years and years and years to give more teams access. We don't have an issue with 20 of the 30 NBA teams being in the postseason or 16 of the 30 NHL teams, but we've got a problem with 12 of the 134 Division I FBS teams being in the postseason. There's no problem with it. And just because one year had 4 blowouts doesn't mean that's some type of trend. Have you ever watched the NCAA tournament, March Madness? There are blowouts in it. Have you ever watched Wild Card Weekend in the NFL? I've watched bad games. Have you ever seen a 1 seed against an 8 seed in the NBA in the postseason and the 1 seed sweep the 8 seed? Nobody then says get rid of the 8 seed, or maybe they do. My point is this, that maybe you could tweak it. You don't necessarily have to give buys to the 4 conference champions. You could just seed them appropriately. If you win your conference, you could just be guaranteed to be in the field. And if you don't want Arizona State to be, the 4 seed, then make them the 7 seed and then bump up, name the team, Notre Dame or Penn State or whomever. Could there have been more compelling games or matchups? Could they have been more competitive? Yeah, absolutely. But Vegas isn't in the business to be wrong. And those point spreads were 7 or 8 points in all 4 of those games. And all 4 of those games were lopsided. But if you played those games another, 10 times over, not every single time Ohio State plays Tennessee is it going to be a 40-point game, or Penn State SMU, although SMU was completely overmatched, going to be a 30-point game. So I'm all for the access. I don't think you then say also on the other side that, Indiana didn't play well, they shouldn't have been in. Well, that's not necessarily the point. They earn their way in. If you just want to say, well, Alabama's got a better roster, they should have been in, but they didn't fully earn it on the field. You're always going to argue the merits of the last team in, or the last 2. We do it with March Madness. The 68 team, we're going to say it should have been Syracuse, not George Mason, or it should have been New Mexico, not Nevada, so on and so forth. But just because you don't play well in the tournament doesn't warrant someone saying they shouldn't have been in the tournament, is the way I look at it. So I think the teams that were there by and large deserved it. You could argue it from a subjective nature. Should it have been SMU or Alabama? But if you've got an issue with the playoff being too large based on 4 opening round games, then I completely disagree with that opinion. And that's my front page Johnism, things that John wants to talk about today.
Yeah, I think at most they could just tweak how they seed everything. Maybe don't guarantee that the non-power will get like a bye if they win. Just tweak a little bit how they reseed things and do things like that. Blowouts are going to happen. I joked with Fletch before the Aztec game on Saturday that the NCAA, they got exactly what they wanted, because in no other sport is so anti-underdog than college football, to where they're the opposite of college basketball. College basketball can take some school that you didn't even know existed 4 hours ago, and you'll be jumping out of your chair rooting for them for the whole tournament because they got you to. College football, they got what they wanted. All those little schools got stomped into the ground. And they don't belong here anyways. And, as far as, driving home after doing the Aztec game, the guy, I don't know who it was, that was on Fox National, he brought up the point of, look, the teams that got picked for the tournament, they didn't pick, these are all teams that could win the tournament. These were the teams that earned their way into the tournament. That was the point of it, to earn your way into it. They didn't just pick 13 teams that, SMU, come on, realistically, they can't win the tournament, so don't put them in there. But hey, there's a 4-loss SEC school that, I think they could win the tournament. Let's just put them in there. That's not how they picked it. You just, you had to earn your way in.
Yeah, I mean, and also nobody really knows what's going to happen once you are in. I mean, the 6 seed New York Giants beat the 1 seed Green Bay Packers on their way to, and then 18-0 New England Patriots team.
And, with Indiana playing bad, how's that any different than, a team in baseball when they're on fire and then all of a sudden they get into the playoffs and then they can't hit?
I just think
it doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that, they just had a bad day, or they just,
I just think it's a dumb argument to say that you shouldn't have an expanded playoff because, well, the top 4 teams just always win it. How do we know that? We don't know the top 4 teams always win it. Then why have an expanded March Madness? Why have 14 seeds? Why have no 5 seed had ever made a national championship game until they did in San Diego State. So I just think it's a flawed argument. Like the New York Giants are going to beat the New England Patriots. Why have them in the field? Well, they did beat the New England Patriots. If you play sports long enough, things happen. And by the way, people watched, and we'll talk about that on the other side as well. Plus, there is a sleeper that nobody is talking about in the NFL that has a very good shot right now to reach the Super Bowl. We'll hear from Colin Cowherd, the latest with Brock Purdy. Should they extend him out or not? It's hour 2 of Jon and Jim. We're here until 6 p.m. Stay with us.
This report is sponsored by Henderson Plumbing, Heating, and Air. San Diego State basketball is back at it this Saturday when they host Utah State at Viejas Arena. Pregame starts at 2 o'clock with tip-off shortly after 3 o'clock. In NBA news, the Lakers take on the Pistons tonight. Pregame with that starts at 7:15, and the tip is after 7:30. You can, of course, hear that game right here on San Diego Sports 760. In Major League Baseball, free agency news, Walker Buehler and the Red Sox came to terms on a one-year deal worth $21 million. And Week 16 in the NFL wraps up tonight with Monday Night Football when New Orleans goes on the road to take on the Packers. Kitchen sink more clogged than Monday morning traffic? Anderson Plumbing Rooter Drain Services clears clogs fast. Their 63 drain stoppage guarantee works with snake unclogging, camera inspection, and degreaser treatments. Call or book online. They always know what's below. Nobody wows clients like they do.
It's Jon and Jim to warm up that drive home.
The Padres do have a new chairman, as Eric Katsenda's tenure is only going to be about a year. Jon Seider, the brother of Peter Seider, will take over as chairman. This really doesn't change the trajectory of where the Padres are going. The Peter Seider days are not coming back in terms of the freedom to spend, right? Like that version of the Padres has likely come and gone.
Now, time for Jon and Jim.
All right, San Diego and Southern California, what's going on? This is hour 2 of Jon and Jim. We're going to get back to that conversation. Jon Seider, the brother of Peter Seider, taking over in terms of the chairman of the San Diego Padres. But what does it mean for the organization moving forward with this critical offseason now underway? Bernie Wilson on the passing of Ricky Henderson. Bernie Wilson will join us at 4 p.m. Chris Hodge, he's got free NFL and college picks for our listeners. Will join us at 4:30. Then back to Aztecs Hoops with Mark Ziegler. We'll hop on the show coming up at 5:30. It's Jon and Jim, sans Jim. If Jim was here, I would explain what sans means to him. It means Jim isn't here today. He will be back next week. And you've got me and Brent hanging out. Now, here's the schedule for the week. We don't have a Christmas Eve show.
Jim would be like, I know what sand is. It's
I know
that stuff
sand
on the
is.
beach.
Yeah, I go to the beach. Yeah. Does Jim have any idea where he is? Because he's like, I'm going to Myrtle Beach and I'm flying to Charlotte. And immediately, like I said, they're not near each other.
Do you think he thinks he's in South Carolina?
He has no. Well, he may be. That's the thing. I mean, Myrtle Beach is in South Carolina. Charlotte's in North Carolina. I have no idea where he is. And he was complaining to me throughout the day on Saturday. Oh, my gosh, you wouldn't believe how long it took us to get here. Like, dude, it's the holiday season. I mean, there's fog. Aztecs can't even get to their basketball game in Northern California. How are you supposed to get to Charlotte, let alone Myrtle Beach? It's like, yeah, I'm flying to Charlotte to get to Myrtle Beach. I'm like, they're not near each other. And he's traveling with a dog. I mean, the dog wasn't the pilot. The dog is Aaron's dog, which is now his dog because they're married. But actually, I want to look that up real quick. Charlotte to Myrtle Beach. Because who flies to Charlotte to get to Myrtle? It's a 4-hour drive. It's like 3:40. So you fly across the country. That's not an easy flight because, first of all, you probably sat in the airport for 6 hours. Then you fly 6 hours. Then you drive 4 hours. Man, he might stay in Myrtle Beach, truthfully. We might not see Jim again. It's like, that was such an inconvenience. I don't know if I'm coming back. I'll be back, presumably next week. We'll have shows for you next week, but we're off Christmas Eve. And by we, I mean me and Brent. We're then off Christmas Day. And then we're back for shows Thursday and Friday. And then we have Aztecs basketball for you Saturday as well. So a couple of things I wanted to touch on. First of all, I think we made fun of Jim over this, and I know Jim touched on this last week when I was out for a few days, that the Aztecs have signed Bert Emanuel Jr. And I think I shared the story maybe on air, maybe not, that I spent like 30 minutes talking with his father, who played 8 years in the NFL, prior to the San Diego State Central Michigan game, because Bert Emanuel Jr. plays at Central Michigan, was a really talented dual threat quarterback. Now, he was bothered by injuries. He didn't always have an opportunity to play quarterback. But they used him in a variety of ways. Great running threat. And I was just eating literally a cheese quesadilla before a game. Like I'm on the concourse because I didn't want to eat what they had in the press box because it was like, like ribs, like a rib sandwich, and I don't eat meat. So I went to the concourse and I got a quesadilla, cheese quesadilla. And I'm sitting there 2 hours before the game. The gates, I think, had just opened. It was a nice sunny day. And I just walk into the seating bowl with a quesadilla and my Aztec like quarter zip. And this gentleman walks up to me. I'm like, does he know who I am? Well, it turns out it's Bert Emanuel. Bert Emanuel Jr.'s father, who spent 8 years in the NFL. And we talk about everything under the sun. NIL, his son, his time. I think he played at SC. He played at San Diego State. When he was at SC, he transferred to Rice, became this great receiving threat, got drafted in the NFL. But it's funny because a few months later, then all of a sudden I saw that Bert Emanuel Jr. was in the transfer portal. And then I saw he had an offer from San Diego State. I got really excited because I had a really great conversation with his father, who I thought was absolutely terrific. And then we saw Bert Emanuel Jr. on field, and he's a really capable player. And you look at this quarterback room now, Jaden Denegal, who spent 3 years at Michigan and was on a national championship team a couple of years ago, and then Bert Emanuel Jr. But I don't even know where I'm going with this other than to say Jim had no clue who Bert Emanuel was. Now,
he still doesn't.
And again, I'm not saying that Bert Emanuel was, he wasn't Randy Moss, right? He wasn't Jerry Rice. But for you and I, Brent, I think if you're in your 40s and you watch the NFL in the 90s, you'd know who he was because he spent the better part of 10 years. He had a 1,000-yard season or two. He was in the NFL for the better part of 10 years, and now his son is coming to San Diego State, which to me I think is pretty cool.
Well, I joked to Jim, I was like, I know who he is from like Tecmo Super Bowl on my Nintendo, because I think he played for the Falcons when that game was out, because that's how I remember him. I remember when he played for Atlanta.
Sure.
Yeah, Jim still doesn't know who it is.
Whatever. Okay, here's the other thing. So everyone tells me, go back to the four. Not everyone, but you heard this narrative play out on social media. Maybe you watched some of the games. Maybe you didn't enjoy them. I understand it. They weren't great football games. You would have had you needed a vested interest. You love college football. You love football. You love one of the 8 teams in the games. Maybe you follow those conferences, so on and so forth. Why expand it? Let's just go back to what it was. It's always the best teams anyway. Even in a 4-team playoff era, the best teams win by large margins, right? You heard this? Well, here are the ratings. And again, were they perfect? Could they have been higher? Yeah, absolutely. But these are huge viewership numbers, and this is exactly why they did it. It's going to result in viewership. It's going to result in revenue. The Ohio State game on Saturday night, which was a complete blowout, but not up against the NFL, had 14.3 million viewers. Here's the context there. That's the second most watched college football game of the year. So that's a huge number. The whole year, the second most watched game is a playoff game. You say, well, shouldn't it have been number one?
Most?
Well, I don't know. But let's say, like, who knows, SEC title game, right? Like one of these big games. The second most viewed game of the playoff opening round, Indiana Notre Dame, standalone Friday night, 13.4 million viewers. That's the third most watched college football game of the year. The other 2 games were on TNT. So when you hear these numbers, you say, well, that's not a great number. Well, actually, it's a huge number. 8.6 million viewers for Texas Clemson on TNT. This is the most watched December sporting event ever on TNT. Okay. And then the 4th most watched game of the 4 was an awful game and was at noon Eastern. Penn State SMU, 6.4 million viewers with a peak of 8 million viewers. These are still massive numbers compared to college football's regular season by and large. And the average number of viewers for the 4 games was 10.6 million viewers, which, again, this round of playoff didn't even exist a year ago. And now you're bringing 11 million people per game to the TV. I understand why they elected to expand it.
You have to remember, too, the 2 games that were on TNT, those were also streamed. Yeah, but they were also streamed on Max.
Yep.
And they count streaming numbers differently. So those numbers may look down just based off of, traditional like TV households.
Sure.
But you have to figure, I watched them on the Max app. And, lots of people probably did. So just because those numbers are down, you have to factor in streaming numbers too, and how many people just streamed it and watched it on the app.
Yeah, I just think it's short-sighted to be like, just to completely write it off. Like, why even hold it? Why even hold them? They averaged 11 million viewers for the 4 games. 11 million times 4 is some combination of 44 million viewers for these 4 games. That's a huge win.
Yeah, but that'd be like saying, oh, well, there's only been one 16 seed that beat a 1 seed, so let's just skip the first round of the NCAA tournament because there's no point.
That's exactly my argument. And here's the other thing. And we all love March Madness. You've grown up with it. Even if you're not a college basketball fan, you fill out the bracket, you throw it on. It's Thursday morning in San Diego. Games are on television, right? Everyone's grown up with the NCAA tournament to some extent. Guess what? When Kentucky plays Morgan State in the opening round on Thursday at noon, I'll tell you this, there ain't 14.3 million people watching. like Tennessee, Ohio State, there's not 6.4 million people watching like that random game on TNT between Penn State and SMU. Like, this has legs, and you do this for the next 5 or 10 years, there's going to be good games. Not every single time Ohio State plays Tennessee is it going to be a blowout. Not every single time Clemson plays Texas is it going to be a blowout. We all watch college football, or most of us do. You all watch the NFL. Most people love the NFL, maybe not all San Diegans because of what's played out here over the last 10 years, but I threw on the NFL last night. Not every game is a great game. I mean, there's blowouts in the NFL too, and there's blowouts in the college football regular season too. But again, I don't think that's a reason why we should not have expanded the postseason. On the other side, by the way, there's two things I wanted to get to NFL related. One of which is something that played out this past weekend, and I think it's a team that nobody is talking about in the NFL that I think has a legitimate shot to get to the Super Bowl that is not the quote-unquote Big Four. Big Four, Philadelphia and Detroit in the NFC. Kansas City, Buffalo in the AFC, right? Like, I think most NFL fans would be basically jaw-dropping shocked if a combination of two of those four teams didn't get to the Super Bowl. I want to tell you why I think there's another team that ultimately may get there in the AFC. Plus, Brock Purdy and an extension. Not so fast, my friend, according to Colin Cowherd, right here on San Diego Sports 760 earlier today. We'll get to Is That Good? Bernie Wilson from the AP will stop by. Coming up at 4 p.m., we'll talk about the legacy of Ricky Henderson. We're here until 6 p.m. Don't go anywhere. It's Jon and Jim. Keep up with San Diego Sports 760 anytime, anywhere, whether you're stepping out of the car or settling into home. Just ask your Google or Alexa smart speaker to play AM 760. You stream it live through the iHeartRadio app. It's never been easier. Stay connected with your favorite. This one, San Diego Sports 760 goes where you go. Bernie Wilson will join us at 4 p.m. More on the passing of Ricky Henderson. Also more on his time here in San Diego. Cowherd coming up momentarily as well. Did you hear something, by the way? Did you hear that correctly? All right, just kidding. I think it was something in my headphones, but it's good now. Two things. I wanted to get to the text line. Would love to hear from you. 70470 started with the word team. 70470 started with the word team. A couple of texts here that disagree with each other on the expanded college football playoff. 619, I completely disagree with. He said, regarding the expanded playoff and the blowouts in the opening round, that's what happens when tomato cans, is the guy that always says tomato cans, play power teams, blowouts. I'm like, oh, that's funny. NIU won at Notre Dame this year. Oh, that's funny. App State won at Michigan. No, what happens is when you give teams opportunities, some of them will take advantage of them. Trust me. Because if this playoff is expanded for the next 25 years, I guarantee you this, there will be an upset or two over the course of the next 25 years. And then 760 says this, totally agree with you, John. There were blowouts with the 4-team format as well. Besides, I've been disinterested in watching the Alabamas, Georgias, Clemsons, LSUs, Ohio States of the world over and over, but I'm going to watch a Boise State and an ASU. And I agree with that. There's something about fresh blood. There's also something about the role of a Cinderella in sports. You know, just giving a Cinderella an opportunity. I don't know if Boise's a true Cinderella. They got to buy. I don't know if ASU is a true Cinderella. They play in a power league and they got to buy, but they were picked to finish like 18th in the Big 12 or however many teams there are in the Big 12 or 16th. And you know, again, I think it's why people turn on March Madness. I think people like watching Oakland beat Kentucky. I don't know if you want Oakland in the national championship game, but I think there's something about, you know, Bryce Drew at Valpo, right? There's something about the Cinderella that plays out in basketball that doesn't play out in football. Why? Because we haven't given that opportunity in football. And then I go to the NFL. Like, if it was as simple as Eagles or Lions or Bills or Chiefs, it would always play out that way. It doesn't. I watched the Giants beat the undefeated Patriots. There are countless examples of lower-seeded teams winning. I get it. It's professional football, not college football. But even now, I feel as if there's this belief that it's just going to be some coronation by a combination of those 4 teams to be in the Super Bowl. I don't think it's as simple and easy as that. And the latest example for me, and Brent was talking about this earlier. I mean, Lamar Jackson has put together, again, an absurd season. He's done it before. This is not the first example of him putting up these numbers, but Brent, the numbers are ridiculous. 37 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions are absurd.
Especially for him, you know, his knock,
No doubt.
his knock has always been, oh, he's got the legs and he can run, but he's not remember the first year, whenever he's not a real quarterback, quote unquote, because, you know, he's just a runner. He can't throw.
I think the last 2 seasons, and don't quote me on this, but I think this is close to accurate. I could look it up easily, but I'm doing this show just with you without Jim. I think it's 69 touchdown passes to 11 interceptions over the last 2 years. I mean, it's ridiculous stuff, right? And I'm watching this Baltimore team, and they drubbed Pittsburgh this past week. And, you know, they're not perfectly positioned. They could absolutely win their division, and they should. They're 10-5. They're tied atop the division right now with Pittsburgh. Let's assume for a moment they win their division. I think they have Houston and Cleveland to close. If they win their division, they get the home game. Obviously, they don't get a bye. And they're going to be in a situation where, yeah, they got to go to Buffalo, or yeah, they got to go to Kansas City, and potentially they got to go to both. Okay, not easy. And Lamar Jackson, you know, is a different quarterback in January opposed to the quarterback he is in December, right? You've heard that narrative over the course of his entire career. But, I mean, the numbers are gaudy. And I think they started 0-2 and they started 1-3, something like that. I mean, they've been red hot. You know, since that slower start, there's something like, you know, 9-2 or whatever it is in their last 11 games. Is it easy to win at Arrowhead? Of course not. Is it going to be easy to win at Orchard Park? Of course not. But is Lamar Jackson somewhat due, considering how consistent he's been in these regular seasons, considering how good he is right now in his true prime? Would it be all that surprising if Lamar Jackson and the Ravens finally put together a postseason?
No, because honestly, the same thing happened. You know, people used to say, oh, Peyton Manning, he's a great regular season quarterback, but, you know, he can never beat the Patriots in the, you know, postseason. And it's but eventually, you get that Jordan Pistons scenario of, you have that huge obstacle that you have to overcome to get to the next level. And, for Lamar Jackson, his huge obstacle is always Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, for Lamar Jackson, it's beating anyone, right? I mean, he lost to Phillip Rivers at home in the post. I don't know. And how many postseason wins does he have? Does he have one?
I think he has one.
I don't think it's more than that, is it? Like Ravens postseason history here recently is not good. They've had a lot of playoff teams. He may have more than one win, but okay. So they beat the Texans last year in the divisional round and then lost the Chiefs. They lost the Bengals in the wild card round.
He's 2-4 in the playoffs.
He's 2-4. Okay. So it's not, he's 2-5, I think. When was his first year in the NFL, Brent? I think his first year was 2018, right?
His first year in the playoffs was
he lost
2019.
Oh, did he not play in 2018? Was he hurt?
He might not have. Yeah, his first playoff game, he lost in the AFC wild card to the Chargers.
Okay,
in 2019. Then the divisional round to Tennessee, wild card to Tennessee again, divisional to Buffalo, divisional to Houston, and last year was.
So he's 2-5. He's 2-5. I think I have that right. He's got 2 wins, and he's lost the Chiefs, Bengals, Bills, Titans, and Chargers.
Yeah.
So he's 2-5. It's not good. Now, it's not the worst, but it's not good. And to be an MVP caliber quarterback, which he is, to be as gaudy as he's been in regular seasons, to be as elite as he is as a runner and a thrower right now, like you're going to have to get to a Super Bowl, like if you're Lamar Jackson. Now, this isn't easy, not being a 1 or a 2 seed and having to go to a Kansas City or go to a Buffalo, but at some point, it's like you're going to have to do it. And why not now? And I feel as if, again, Kansas City, they win all these 1-score games. Buffalo hasn't necessarily been clutch of their postseason history either. I don't know if it's going to be this year or not, but this coronation, and you can say maybe the same thing in the NFC. I mean, maybe someone gets through, right? Maybe Minnesota gets through. You're going to have to see it, right? I don't know if Minnesota is going to get through Detroit. I don't know if Minnesota is going to get through Philadelphia, but it's a possibility. We'll see if Jalen Hurts is fully healthy. But I guess my point is this, that the same point that I make with the college football expanded playoff, I'm going to make right now with the NFL. And again, most people that watch the NFL are like, oh, it's going to be the Chiefs. It's going to be the Bills. It's going to be the Lions. It's going to be the Eagles. Not so fast, my friend, is what I would say. What if it is Minnesota? What if it is, Baltimore? What if it is the Chargers? That would surprise me, but you get the point. There's a reason we play the games. That's what makes this thing so great. Someone else off the text line, 619, says when Virginia lost as a number 1. That was true madness. You have to keep that in both basketball and football. The upset will happen. I think you were talking about maybe Virginia playing, in the NCAA tournament, losing to UMBC as the top overall seed in the tournament. We've seen this play out. You just need to give teams opportunities. All right, we'll hear from Colin Cowherd on the other side on Brock Purdy. Should the Niners extend him or not following another loss here in 2024? One thing we know, the Niners are not heading to the postseason. Bernie Wilson from the AP will join us at 4 p.m. We're here until 6. It's Jon and Jim.
NFL wraps up tonight on Monday Night Football when the Saints go on the road to Lambeau to take on Jordan Love and the Packers. Kickoff is around 5:15 in that one. In MLB free agency news, Walker Buehler and the Red Sox came to terms on a one-year deal worth $21 million today. The Lakers host the Pistons tonight. You can hear pregame starting at 7:15 with a tip right after 7:30 right here on San Diego Sports 760. And the Aztec basketball team is back at it this Saturday against Utah State at Viejas Arena. You can hear pregame starting at 2 o'clock. Uncle Teddy will have the tip shortly after 3. Life gets messy during the holidays, but your car doesn't have to. Our holiday membership sale at Superstar Car Wash is here. Get unlimited washes and our Super Protect wash for just $20. Visit superstarwash.com or text Jolly to 27800. Terms apply.
All right, Bernie Wilson from the AP on the thing of Ricky Henderson will join us at 4 p.m. Mark Ziegler on the Aztecs, who had that crazy travel weekend, but win in San Jose against Cal, have a big one against Utah State coming up. We'll join us at 5:30, and Chris Hodgson taking Vegas. 3 picks for our listeners coming up at 4:30. Colin Cowherd, you can hear weekdays right here on San Diego Sports 760 from 9 to noon. I thought he made some good points on Brock Purdy. Now, the business of the NFL is you pay your quarterback because what other option do you have? You don't let your starting quarterback traditionally walk, especially when you've won at the level that San Francisco's won at over the last few years. Now, of course, they're having a down year right now. They're not heading to the postseason. He had another bad pick this past weekend against Miami. He's had a couple of those here recently. So there's still talks, obviously, of extending out Brock Purdy because he's the starting quarterback of a team that last year was in the Super Bowl. But Colin Cowherd says not so fast, my friend. So let's listen to Colin Cowherd, then react. This was earlier today on The Herd.
2 things are official for the San Francisco 49ers. Number 1, they're out of the playoffs. Number 2, they would be insane to sign Brock Purdy early to a big money contract. 2nd week in a row. The game's there. Couple minutes left. Make a play. Horrible pick. So they were healthy on defense. Kittle was great. That's the best Debo I've seen all season. Jennings was there. Miami's reeling, and I got a nothing burger. 17 points. 2nd week in a row. Bad pick. 11 penalties. So if you want to be a $55 million quarterback, it's not about how good are you when everything's perfect. It's about when you're missing a piece or two. Like Sam Darnold's missing a left tackle. They go 8-0. I don't want to hear they don't have Christian McCaffrey. That's where you pay $55 million. That's where you pay $48 million when things aren't perfect. And so that's my takeaway on Purdy. He's solid, and he can be really productive if everything is in line. That's not the NFL. The NFL is much closer to Cincinnati this year. I mean, look at Joe Burrow. I don't love the owner. The coach is fine. Defense is terrible. Offensive line is below average. And the guy's like leads the NFL in passing touchdowns and passing yards. Well, he's got Jamar Chase. Oh, gosh, he gets one great receiver. Sorry. Now, Brock Purdy had Jennings. Oh, Debo was fantastic yesterday. George Kittle's been fantastic all season. Offensive line was fine. His production was okay. And I get nothing. I get 17 points. And in the biggest moment of the game, I get a bad pick.
Yeah, I kind of agree. You know, again, is he better than most? He probably has been. And he was last year. He was very good last year. 31 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, really good team. They get to the Super Bowl. This year, it's not all on him, but like heavy is the head that wears the crown. I mean, it's going to be Kyle Shanahan, and it's going to be Brock Purdy. If you commit to Brock Purdy, you're committing to basically prioritizing him over other important pieces moving forward. And you're saying, hey, Brock, you're going to have to pick up the slack, where a year ago it just felt like he fit perfectly into their larger puzzle, right? Like he was just a piece of the puzzle. But is he like the entire puzzle? Is he the keystone of the puzzle? And I think a lot of people would tell you, maybe it's easy to do it now because they're not very good right now. I think it's easy to kind of question whether he's like the keystone to make the thing work.
These are all things that we've been bringing up for a year and a half, 2 years, that if you even brought it up in discussion, 49ers fans would just throw a fit because, you know, my whole argument with Purdy was, okay, but let's, you know, give credit that he has, arguably the best tight end in football, one of the top two at least. He's, best tight end in football. He has top 3 offensive line in football. He had a probably top 3 receiving core when they were healthy in football. He has a top running back in football. He had all these things. He had a great defense. He had all these things that contributed to his success. And if you just brought up, yeah, but do you think he would do that if he didn't have all those other things? Oh, what? Of course he would. What are you talking about? He doesn't need Christian McCaffrey or Debo or any of those. He's great. And then all those pieces got taken away, and he's kind of getting exposed now.
Yeah, I mean, in the NFL,
a third of the teams in the league would still take him. Don't get me wrong, but I think he's just getting exposed now.
Yeah, and I think in the NFL, it's like you either are great or what are you? It's like if you're not a top 8 quarterback, can you win a Super Bowl? Now, there's examples where the answer is yes. So maybe it is possible. And if you have all the pieces around you, if you have the right coaching staff, if you got the right weapons, to Brent's point, if you got that perfect defense, there are examples of quarterbacks certainly leading teams to the Super Bowl that aren't quote unquote elite. I think you could argue maybe Brock Purdy a year ago. I mean, look at the Niners getting to the Super Bowl 2 of the last 3 years without elite quarterback play. But at the end of the day, I mean, if Joe Burrow hasn't won a Super Bowl yet, if Josh Allen hasn't won a Super Bowl yet, if Lamar Jackson hasn't won a Super Bowl yet, are you going to win one before them? If you're someone like Brock Purdy, who I agree with you, I think it's more than a third of the league would take him. I think it's half the league. But even at half the league, like, where are you in that pecking order? You got to get through either Mahomes or, I mean, even like a Hurts, or look at the quarterback play right now in Detroit. Like, there's 6, 8, 10 guys we're lining up right now before Brock Purdy. Why are you paying him as if he's the number 1 quarterback in the NFL? If there's 6, 8, 10, 12 guys you would take before him, and I'll tell you why, because the system stacks up that way. What else are you going to do? You going to move on from him?
Well, and it's because that's the way the union has it set up too, to where even if you're just, and this isn't a knock on Purdy, even if you're just like a mid-level quarterback, where you're like a B tier quarterback, not when your contract's up, we don't care if, the whole league recognizes that, you're just a average B quarterback, but when your contract's up, nope, you're Brett Favre and Peyton Manning and all those guys put together, because you need to be the highest paid quarterback. And if you don't ask for the most money out of any quarterback, then the union's going to get pissed at you because you're screwing up the quarterback market for everyone else.
There's that. And then there's the part of it where we hear a lot of discussion about in the NFL. It's like, you got to win early before these quarterbacks are taking up all that portion of the cap, unless you're a team like Kansas City and you have Patrick Mahomes. Like, Mahomes is that good. Brady in his career was that good that they would figure it all out. Yeah, I know Brady maybe took a little less, and truthfully, Mahomes should be making more than he is right now. But it's like, if you don't win in that 5-year period of time, and then all of a sudden you're using the additional resources on quarterback, you didn't win when Purdy was making $1 million and you had the additional resources. How are you not going to win when he's making $55 million and you don't have the additional resources?
Yeah, because, well, especially guys like Mahomes and even like Rodgers when he was in Green Bay, they didn't necessarily have the greatest wide receivers, but he played well enough that he took, once again, average wide receivers and he elevated them and made them look a lot better than they were. There's a reason why, with exception of Devontae Adams and his 37 teams he's played for in the last 5 years, that every wide receiver that leaves Green Bay fails because they weren't that good. They were, elevated by the quarterback play. Yeah. And, that's another thing I brought up, is Brock Purdy elevating the play of Christian McCaffrey, or is it, and Debo and those guys, or is it the other way around?
Right.
But you couldn't say that either, because otherwise 49ers fans would get mad.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think they're fair conversations and it's a fair question. It's not to say, here's the truth. He will get extended by the Niners. I'd be very surprised if he didn't. I mean, now you have seen quarterback trades. Those have played out, and maybe there's a win-win out there. Maybe Purdy is better in his second stop. It's not that he's been bad. It's just he hasn't been good enough. Like, I don't think there's a Niner fan out there, or I don't think a majority of Niner fans are thinking to themselves that we got there once with Purdy, and the next time we get there, it's going to be our time. I think most people would probably tell you, you know what, we've had enough pieces around him where we're capable of winning a Super Bowl. Now let's go get the quarterback that can get us over the hump.
You know, in one respect, maybe it's better for the Niners because if he goes into his free agency year throwing 50 touchdowns and 6 interceptions,
Then he's really
they're screwed.
Paid. Yeah.
But if he goes in there, 22 touchdowns and 16 interceptions, they're not going to have to pay an arm and a leg for him, and they might save some money.
That's a possibility. All right, we'll get to Is That Good? The best and worst of the sports weekend. On the other side, Bernie Wilson will join us at 4 p.m. with more on the passing of Ricky Henderson. Chris Hodge has free NFL and college picks for our listeners at 4:30. And then Mark Ziegler from the UT on the Aztecs basketball crazy travel weekend and their win in San Jose over Cal. He'll join us at 5:30. It's Jon and Jim, holiday week. We're off for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, but with you today and Thursday and Friday as well. So stay with us on Jon and Jim. All right, make sure to catch Lakers basketball tonight when they take on the Pistons. Pre-game at 7:15, tip at 7:30. Your home for Lakers basketball in San Diego. San Diego Sports 760. Bernie Wilson from the AP. Join us coming up at 4 p.m. By the way, he's an retired.
Yeah, he's a newly retired.
Is he officially retired? Because I saw him working at the A House in the SDSU top 25 last week. It might be the end of the year. Well, that'll be the first question. But then, of course, more on Henderson passing his legacy. His time with the San Diego Padres. Bernie Wilson will join us coming up at 4 p.m. A couple of things, and we'll get to is that good, the best and worst of the sports weekend momentarily. They're really hyping up. You've noticed this, Brent. They're really hyping up this NBA Mickey Mouse game.
Oh,
at noon Eastern between the Knicks.
Dunk the halls. Yeah,
dunk the halls. Now, again, this is the NBA used to dominate Christmas Day, right? You get your 4 or 5 games. There'd be no NFL action unless it was like a Sunday, but they had the day to themselves. But now the NFL is so uber aggressive.
Dude, I used to love it. Like me and my cousin, they're like the only NBA people in my family. So Christmas Day was like the only time we could get them to watch NBA because, unless they wanted to watch the 7th viewing of A Christmas Story on TNT, there was nothing else to watch.
Well, there's nothing else on, and they had it to themselves for years and years and years. Now the NFL, big bad NFL has stepped in. They got the Netflix Christmas Day games. These are going to do massive numbers. We all understand it. So ESPN's answer, or ABC ESPN's answer to this, I don't think it's going to combat the Chiefs playing on Christmas Day, but they're going to have the dunk the halls Mickey characters.
It pretty much looks like the basketball equivalent of that stupid Simpsons thing that ESPN did like a week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Only it's Mickey instead of, Simpsons characters.
Will I turn that on? Maybe. 9 a.m. Christmas Day, Knicks Spurs. I'll watch it for 2 minutes.
The new Schaefer family tradition.
The Mickey version. I mean, we'll throw the NBA on. We'll throw the NFL on. I think I'll look to see what it looks like. And maybe Jones likes it as a 5-year-old.
Like
I think he doesn't really like Mickey. He's not really into that.
What?
I know. It's weird. He's not into that.
I didn't know that
character.
even was the thing.
No, he's more into like Bluey.
Okay.
And
that little
Snoopy.
bald kid. Is that still a thing? Was that little bald?
No,
Harry
Bluey's
Christian
like
looking kid? Was
Bluey's
Caillou
like a
or
dog.
Caillou? I know who Bluey is.
Yeah.
He's a dog, but the little bald-headed kid that was.
I don't know who that is.
Was it Caillou or Caillou or
Caillou?
I don't know.
No, I don't know. All right. Anyway, Bernie Wilson will join us coming up at 4 p.m. right now. Let's get to this.
Is that good?
Wilcox, snapper, Huber, holder, from 29 yards away. Oh, he missed it badly. Kick on the way. Boswell. That's a winner.
The good and bad from the sports weekend.
All right, so I've got a few, and we'll touch on this more with Mark Ziegler coming up at 5:30. But San Diego State was really impressive by and large against Cal. A good team in Cal. They've had some good wins. Are they great? No, their metrics wouldn't say they're great. But you're in Northern California taking on a very capable offense. This was a Cal team averaging 81 points per game. San Diego State held them to 50, and a lot of that came in garbage time. Anyway, in this win, Nick Boyd became the first player to go 5 for 5 from 3 or better in a half. Like perfect from 3, going 5 for 5 or better in the Fisher-Dutcher era. He was 5 for 5 from 3 in the second half. Aztecs roll. They led by 29. They win by 21, 71-50. But Nick Boyd, 5 for 5 from deep in the second half against Cal. Is that good?
One of the other things that I thought was impressive about that game, and they had the stat on they're on ACC Network.
ACC Network, yeah.
That the Aztecs didn't take the court until 7:06 for their 7:30 tip.
Yeah.
There was no walkthrough earlier in the day or anything like that. They, like they usually do. They literally got into the arena, laced up their shoes, put on their jerseys, not in that order, and then they just went out and played.
Yeah, and they played as well as they did. Now, they trailed early. I think they started 2 for 16. But, again, what's the adage? Defense travels. The defense kept them in it. They held Cal to 15% shooting or something like that.
Was it Cal missed 21 out of 24 field goals at one point?
At one point, yeah. So, anyway, San Diego State wins big. They're home Saturday to take on Utah State. All right, my next one is this. We've touched on this a bit here this hour. Lamar Jackson's playing out of his mind. 3 touchdown passes in that victory over the Steelers this past week. They win 34-17. They kind of control their destiny right now in the division to win it. He's got 37 touchdown passes to 4 interceptions. I know he's had gaudy numbers before. I know he's won an MVP before. But 37 touchdowns to 4 INTs, is that good?
It is good!
And again, are they going to win in Buffalo and Kansas City in the same postseason? It's different. I get it. Regular season isn't the postseason. He's going to have to prove it to us. Even one of those wins would be incredible, winning at Buffalo or winning at Kansas City. To win 2 of those games, I mean, maybe that's a bridge too far, but the way he's played this year, it's at least not outside the complete realm of possibility. And then finally, more on Ricky Henderson. I mean, just when you look into the numbers, there's a little bit of Tony Gwynn and Ricky Henderson from a numbers perspective. Not the same player, although Tony could really run when he was young. But there's just some ridiculous stats when it comes to Ricky Henderson, like 130 steals in a season. We celebrate 50 right now with new rules as being a huge number. 1,406 career steals is absolutely bonkers. So I'll ask on Ricky Henderson, as one of the great leadoff hitters of all time, if not the greatest leadoff hitter of all time, the greatest in terms of stolen bases in the history of the sport, is that good?
It is good!
They just jump off the page. You go to Baseball Reference, you look at the year-by-year steal totals, you look at the on-base percentage, you just look at what he was able to do.
With the new
it's
rules
amazing.
today, how many steals do you think he would get in a season? With the bigger bags, you can only throw over twice.
It's hard to have more than 130 because you only have so many. How many times are you on base?
Yes,
how many times is there someone in front of you? But to your point, I would say more than 130. Because if he stole 130 in 1982,
that's just insane.
I would say, even a 1% uptick is another like one. I mean, he would have had 132 steals. Like, there's no way he stole 130 bases in 1982, and with larger bases and with the pickoff rules, he would have had less. He would have had more. So I think conservatively 130. I mean, he could have had 150, Brent, for all I know. I don't know how many opportunities there were, but I think probably somewhere between that, like 135 and 145 would have been realistic for Henderson. And 1,400 is just utter insanity. Like I said, I mean, there's home run records, but the home run record isn't 50% more home runs that have ever been hit. That's what makes the Henderson steal number so crazy. That 1,406 steals is what, 500 more than what, Ty Cobb?
Was it Ty Cobb?
Or whomever's second, Lou Brock?
I think it was Lou Brock.
I mean, think about that. He's got 500 more steals than second place all time in his career. That's crazy. Yeah, like what's the career steals leaders?
I'm looking up right now.
Yeah. I think he's 500 more than whoever's in second place, right?
Yeah, Lou Brock was in second. Ricky had 1,406. Lou Brock had 938.
Ty Cobb's on that list, right?
Yeah, he's fourth. He had 897. Billy Hamilton is third right now. Actually.
That's a big number. He's 900 plus, Billy Hamilton?
Yeah, he's at 914.
Yeah, but again, you can't compare 900 to 1,400. That's 50% more career steals than anyone has ever had in the history of the sport. So let's touch more on Ricky Henderson's career with Bernie Wilson from the AP. On the other side, Chris Hodge taking Vegas will join us at 4:30. Mark Ziegler will join us at 5:30. We're here until 6. It's Jon and Jim.
This report is sponsored by Toyota Carlsbad, relaxed and friendly since 1972. Week 16 in the NFL wraps up tonight on Monday Night Football when New Orleans goes on the road to Lambeau Field to take on Jordan Love and the Packers. Kickoff is slightly after 5:15. In NBA news, the Lakers host the Pistons tonight. Pregame for that starts right here on San Diego Sports 760 at 7:15 with a tip right after 7:30. In Major League Baseball free agency news today, Walker Buehler and the Red Sox came to terms on a one-year deal worth $21 million. The Aztec basketball team is back at it on Saturday when they host Utah State. Pre-game coverage starts at 2 o'clock with a tip with Uncle Teddy at 3. Hurry in today to Toyota Carlsbad for big savings on new Toyotas during Toyotathon. Save with low APR financing or lease specials. Not all buyers qualify. Limited terms on approved credit. Offer ends January 6, 2025. Details at toyotacarlsbad.com.
It's Jon and Jim to warm up that drive home.
The Padres do have a new chairman, as Eric Katsenda's tenure is only going to be about a year. John Seider, the brother of Peter Seider, will take over as chairman. This really doesn't change the trajectory of where the Padres are going. The Peter Seider days are not coming back in terms of the freedom to spend, right? Like that version of the Padres has likely come and gone.
Now, time for Jon and Jim.
All right, San Diego, Southern California, what's going on? Hour 3, Jon and Jim here until 6 p.m. We've been talking about the legacy of Ricky Henderson, who passed this past weekend, one of the greats in the history of the sport, and always enjoy spending some time with Bernie Wilson from the AP, who's back with us right now on Jon and Jim. So first of all, Bernie, happy holidays, and secondly, happy retirement as well. What's the detail here on your retirement? Are you already retired and you're hopping on, or when are you retired?
No, last day is January 3rd. AP offered a bunch of us buyouts, and those of us in position to take them said absolutely.
All right, so January 3rd. So yeah, okay. So you're still.
So I'll be free for cocktails that afternoon at 5 o'clock.
Perfect. We're free actually before then. every weekday.
I'd be free at 8 a.m. that day for cocktails. So,
Bernie, I mean, obviously, it goes without saying what Ricky Henderson meant to the sport of baseball, and we know locally he spent some time here as well. When you think back on Ricky Henderson in a Padres uniform, and obviously spending time playing with Tony Gwynn as well, like where does your mind go when you think about Ricky in San Diego?
Ricky, first of all, was one of the coolest dudes you could ever hope to cover. He had 2 stints with the Padres, 96, 97, and then 2001. And, when you hear things and, I suppose early in his career, he might have been difficult to deal with, but he was terrific, just absolutely phenomenal to talk with and to write about and hang around. And, first of all, it's awfully sad to hear that he died. I mean, that's just brutal. He was just such a unique individual and ball player. I mean, he's absolutely, one of the all-time greats. The thing that stands out to me, 2 things actually. The first one was during his legendary San Diego Surf Dogs career, I think it was 2006, they had a Ricky Henderson media day. We went out to Tony Gwynn Stadium to interview him, and he was talking about that he was in such good shape still that the equipment manager asked him what size pants he wore, and he said size 34. And it's like, how many of us, I can't remember how old he was at the time, but how many of us would have killed to get back into a size 34 pair of pants? He just was a freak of nature. And then, in the season in 2001, he took the walks record from Babe Ruth, the runs record from Ty Cobb, with the home run, and then he slid feet first into home plate. And then he got his 3,000th hit the day Tony Gwynn retired. And so that sort of, made that day completely off the charts. And I still remember Afterward, they, of course, had a post-game ceremony for T. Gwynn on the field at the late, great Qualcomm Jack Murphy Stadium, whatever it was then, Qualcomm, I guess. And so we're all hanging around in the dugout, and it's like, oh, shoot, you got your 3,000 hits today. And so, we had a little impromptu press conference with Ricky in the dugout as they were honoring Tony Gwynn. So, I mean, that was a true 2-for-1 day for the scribes who covered the Padres. T. Gwynn playing the last game of a Hall of Fame career, and then Ricky Henderson getting his hit number 3,000 on the last day of the season.
That's truly
unbelievable. It was incredible, just like he was. And the other thing that stands out is during one of his holdouts early in his career, his quote was, "Bing, bing, when the bell rings, Ricky will be there." The classic third person. And so I always think, when I think or hear Ricky, it's like, bing, bing, when the bell rings, Ricky will be there.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, again, Bernie Wilson from the AP joining us right now on Jon and Jim, talking about, again, the career and time of Ricky Henderson, who unfortunately passed away at the age of 65 this past weekend. I'm left thinking, as someone in my 40s, that, I mean, Ricky Henderson is an absolute baseball legend for anyone that was in their 40s and had a chance to watch him either live or on television. I guess if you're younger than that, maybe if you're in your 30s, you don't really kind of understand what he meant to the sport overall. But we talked about this earlier as well, Bernie. It's like baseball is different today. And maybe this is just all walks of life, but baseball today isn't baseball in the 1980s or even the 1990s. He just had he had a presence in sport, didn't he? Like today, it's harder to transcend and break through if you're a baseball player. But I feel as if Ricky Henderson, just for sports fans, kind of broke through during his playing days. Is that a fair thing to say?
Oh, absolutely. Some people thought he was a little bit over the top. The day he broke the stolen bases record, he slid into third, head first, and pulled the bag out of the ground and held it over his head and said, "I am the greatest." And I remember later that night, Nolan Ryan threw a no-hitter. So, the baseball gods have a way of leveling things out. But no, he was just a freak in nature. Incredible athlete, incredible ball player. And that era of baseball's long gone. Mm-hmm. I don't quite know how to put it into words, but as an old guy, trust me, that it's long gone. He not only meant a lot to baseball, but he meant a lot to Oakland.
Sure.
And I know that he throughout a ceremonial first pitch or caught one or something, and was around during the A's sad final days in Oakland. But no, he was just a cool cat is the way I'll always remember him, on and off the field. I saw him one time at spring training over in Scottsdale one night, wearing a fur coat. He was, again, just a cool cat. He was just so fun to talk to. He literally, it's like he lived on planet Ricky. And we were just lucky to orbit it a couple of times in our careers. So, fond memories, incredibly sad, way too young to die.
Yeah, way too young. There's no doubt about it. Bernie Wilson with us right now on Jon and Jim. Would you say also, like, when you think about, like you mentioned, some of the flamboyance and some of the on-field mannerisms or displays, is that like kind of ahead of its time? You think about where the sport is now. I go back to like the ad campaign around Fernando Tatis Jr. before the steroids, before he was popped. It was like, getting rid of the unwritten rules, so to speak, right? That it feels as if he was maybe more for this era with his flamboyant style as opposed to the way baseball was played in the 1980s.
Yeah, probably. But, the thing about Ricky is he could get away with it. Mm-hmm. He could back it up. I don't think any pitcher ever threw at him for stealing a base.
Right.
Unlike, pitchers would throw at guys if they showboated or, God heaven help us if you could bring Bob Gibson and Don Drysdale into this era and with guys doing bat flips, they'd be wearing one in their ribs or on their chin the next time they were up. But he was flamboyant, but again, he earned it, and he had no problem expressing it. And I know back then some people didn't like it, but it's a game, it's entertainment, and he certainly was one of the most entertaining ball players I've ever seen, and again, of all time.
Switching to the now with the Padres, we learned over the weekend it's expected that John Seidler, the brother of Peter Seidler, is going to become chairman. We know their spend has come way down since the untimely passing of Peter less than 2 years ago, whenever that was, just over a year ago, actually. What changes for you, if anything, now that the chairman goes from Eric Katsenda back to the Seidler family with his brother John?
Well, big boy. Oh, first of all, it's good that you're carrying all the weight today while Jim's out slacking. I meant to say that earlier.
I appreciate you saying that. Should he just stay gone? Like, should he just stay away?
I mean, you've catapulted into number one, right? Stealing your lunch. Bro, as of 5 o'clock on January 3rd, nothing's going to matter to me.
No, it's 5 o'clock on January 3rd. It's the John and Bernie show.
Yeah, there you go. Bring me in studio. We'll have some laughs. But, unless the on-field product changes, I don't know that it matters. Let me put it this way. I may still end up freelancing some big games for AP. So I guess I shouldn't pile on, but it seems that the dream of Peter Seidler, the goal, the parade on the water, on the land, even maybe in the air, it seems like that's not being followed up on. I know he spent a lot of money, but, he wanted to bring the city a championship. And I don't know that is being, if those running the team are trying to live up to his legacy, want to live up to it. I don't know. They don't communicate very well, and which is fine. That's their choice. But I have no idea what their process is, their thinking. It's very obvious, though, if you're at Petco Park any given night, they are absolutely printing money down there. Granted, it's a cashless venue, but you know what I mean. They're just raking it in. Beer sales, concessions, jerseys, everything. They seem to be printing money. They just seem to be averse to spending it. So I know there's a lot of Seidler offspring. So I have no idea how this came about, what it meant. I met Eric Katsenda one time, at the celebration of life for Peter, never crossed paths with him again. So yeah, I don't know what to say other than they need to score a run here and there if they want to, be successful, and they failed in 24 straight innings against the Dodgers. So unless this Seidler can hit or pitch, I don't know that it changes much. I think what fans want to know is, are you going to put a competitive team on the field that can try to get back into October and this time, avoid a 24-inning scoreless streak? So I think that's what fans want to know. And again, it's back in the old days when there was a new person, they'd have a press conference or something, and teams just don't do that stuff anymore. Again, their choice, but I have no clue whatsoever. And if they don't do anything before January 3rd, I don't have to worry about it.
That's a very good point.
How's that for an attitude?
I like that. Well, it's interesting you say that, though, and we'll let you run. But we've only heard from the Padres chairman really publicly in one capacity since the passing of Peter Seidler. You had Peter pass. He was very open with the media. He often spoke with the media during his tenure, but then Eric took over, Eric Katsenda, and he spoke with the media, and I thought did a well enough job in Peoria before spring training in 2024. We didn't hear from him really again. And now here we are, like you said, they're passing the baton supposedly to John Seidler. Maybe we'll hear from him in February at spring training. You're talking about 18 months of time where whomever is representing ownership, you basically have 3 sound bites or 5 minutes with the person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's unbelievable.
What would be good is if this fan base didn't have to wait until spring training to hear from him.
Right.
It really behooves them to put him out in front of cameras and scribes and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree.
We all as scribes, we miss Peter Seidler dearly. I miss Ron Fowler. I mean, where's the passion? I get it. There just doesn't seem to be any passion coming from the executive suites down there. I mean, not that they need to be Jerry Jones or George Steinbrenner, but those guys fill notebooks. And Jerry Jones might be annoying, but he talks after every game, win or lose. And so did George Steinbrenner. And Steinbrenner would call the tabloids when he was pissed off about something and get things stirred up. But I just don't see any passion coming from the ownership and executive suites. So, and, as we were told by a certain football team that used to play here, it is what it is. But it's like, come on, man. It's this fan base is desperate for a winner, and especially after the El Foldo of October, and it just would seem to behoove. Maybe I should go into crisis communications at 6 p.m. on January 3rd, and, say, get out there in front of this and try to fire up the fans, give them something to pin some hope on, because as of right now, I don't see much. So
no, I think you speak for a number of people probably that are attending games at Petco Park. Like you said, they drew 3.2 million people last year, a franchise record. Bernie, thank you. Happy holidays. Congrats on the retirement. Let's do it in 2025 as well.
Yeah, call anytime, and I will see you at Viejas Arena on December 28th, my last gig with the AP.
I'm looking forward to it. Yep, Saturday, Utah State, big game. I'll see you Saturday, Bernie.
Let's do a selfie, bro.
We're going to do that. We're doing it. Thanks, Bernie.
All right, take care, Jeff.
Bernie Wilson with the AP. I want to react to that on the other side. We'll get to the wrap. Chris Hodge taking Vegas will join us at 4:30. It's Jon and Jim. Is this Christmas music? AM radio keeps vital voices accessible. Congress can secure its future, but we need your help. Text AM to 52886 now to support keeping AM radio in cars. So you're a member of Congress to pass legislation now and keep AM radio in cars. Standard message and data rates do apply.
It said it was tropical snowman.
Sounded like that. Yeah, it sounded like tropical. All right, tropical snowman. Chris Hodge taking Vegas will join us in less than 10 minutes. Coming up later this hour, if you missed the conversation with Paul Garrison on aspects of football recruiting and your activity with quarterbacks in the portal, we'll do that at 5. More people from UT. It's going to join us coming up at 5:30. I wanted to react to what Bernie Wilson said there on the air, which was something along the lines of, like, where's the passion, right? Like, from the Padres ownership that reflects how passionate their fan base is. Like, that's not a comment about the fan base. How many times have you heard me say over the last 2 years, right here on Jon Jim, that there is not a better fan base than the Padres fan base right now in Major League Baseball? Maybe there's a comparable fan base, but the Padres fan base has been incredible. 3.2 million fans last year, franchise record. This is coming off a very disappointing 2023. It's not like 2023 was all roses. They were there every night in 2023. It's a Wednesday night against the Rockies. The team's 2 games under 500 in September. Talking about 2023, there's 40,000 people. They're selling out every single game. You see Padres stuff everywhere you go. People are enamored with the San Diego Padres. They expect that level of passion back. Now, to be fair, the organization has pulled off some incredible moves over the last half decade. A lot of that under Peter, but some of the trades that AJ Preller pulled off last year, even after Peter, talking about Dylan Cease, Luis Ariz. But it does feel like as the sport operates this offseason, the hot stove, or whatever it is, like it's eerily quiet. And okay, there's still time. It doesn't mean that this is the team they're going to bring with them in the 2025 season. It doesn't mean they're not capable of pulling off a move like they did last year in adding players like Cease or Ariz, but I don't know. It's just like, it's one thing to be quiet. Okay, it's only December 23rd. They'll make moves. Everyone knows they're going to have a left fielder and catcher and 4th and 5th starter. Everyone understands that. But just everything's quiet. We hear from no one. I guess we heard from AJ Preller briefly at the winter meetings. We heard from Mike Schild on Roki Sasaki. Maybe we haven't heard from a chairperson because they're transitioning. I mean, Eric Katsenda is in his entire tenure spoke with the media one time. And, you know, that alone isn't like a critique. I mean, they won 93 games. I'd prefer they won 93 games and speak one time than speak 10 times they win 83 games. But it just feels like people want to know the plan. You lost in disappointing fashion in the postseason. It's a credit to you. You got there. It's a credit to the organization that they won 93 games. You didn't score your last 24 innings. You're watching your rivals get better this offseason. And all that Padre fans are talking about is how can we stay under the CBT? Do we need to trade Dylan Cease? Do we need to trade Luis Ariz? All of our eggs are in the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes. Like, you just want to feel as if you're being heard when things are tough. And things are tough when you don't score in 24 consecutive innings, when you lose a series to the Dodgers that you thought you were going to win when you took a 2-1 series lead, when you watch the Dodgers make additions like Blake Snell, a former Cy Young Award winner for you. That's tough to stomach. You just want to feel as if you're being heard and recognized. And hopefully that happens at some point in 2025. Again, is it the end all be all? No. I'd rather them win 93 games than hear from John Seider every day. But maybe more of both. You want to see him win again in 2025, and you want to hear that your feedback is being received. And I think there is a lot of feedback right now from Padres fans. I think there is a lot of like, do something meme. Like, it's time. We're past the winter meetings. There's 8 or 10 teams that have gotten better this year, including the Dodgers and the Mets. You're in the National League. You're in the same division as the Dodgers. You watch what the Giants are doing. Like, what do they say? Staying the same is falling behind. Time to pick up the pace, I would say, if you're the Padres organization this offseason. All right, Chris Hodge will join us on the other side. He's got free picks for us. NFL, of course, tonight, Monday Night Football. Packers, Saints. Is there a reason to watch? The Packers are going to win this game, right?
They should kick their ass. I think Green Bay clinches a wild card if they win tonight.
Okay. So Green Bay and New Orleans tonight on Monday Night Football. Chris Hodge will get us ready. He's got college football for us. He's got NFL for us. He'll join us on the other side. He's been terrific for our listeners. Then again at 5:30, Mark Ziegler from the Union Tribune. This is Jon and Jim.
This report is sponsored by Radiant Hospice. Week 16 in the NFL wraps up tonight on Monday Night Football when the Saints go on the road to Lambeau Field to take on Jordan Love and the Packers. Kickoff there is around 5:15. In Major League Baseball news, free agent Walker Buehler and the Red Sox came to terms on a one-year deal worth $21 million today. And the Lakers host the Pistons tonight. You can hear it all on San Diego Sports 760. Pre-game coverage starts at 7:15 with the tip right after 7:30. And the Aztecs basketball team, they're back at it on Saturday as they host Utah State. Pre-game coverage starts right here at 2 p.m. And the tip with Uncle Teddy is right after 3 o'clock. Radiant Hospice offers personalized care with a focus on comfort and quality of life. Their medical team is committed to providing the highest level of care and support during this important time. For more information, reach out to them on the web at radianthospice.com.
We've got Chris Hodge taking Vegas with us on a Monday. Typically joins us Thursday. He has been red hot for our listeners. Now, the free text play finally lost last week. You have 7 consecutive wins. Joining us on Jon and Jim. I want to say you're 8-2 in your last 10 Thursday night free plays. Now, we do have Monday Night Football tonight. Not exactly the greatest game in NFL history, but Packers and Saints tonight. First of all, happy holidays. And secondly, what do you have for tonight? Because that's going to be your free text play tonight, right? On Packers and Saints.
Yeah, absolutely. And happy holidays to you and all of your listeners. Thank you for having me. We're going to go with just text the word win to the number 545454. Obviously, look, Green Bay is a big favorite tonight. Weather's not that bad, so the total is in play as well. We expect Green Bay to win the game, whether they cover the game or not. That's the issue. So you text the word win to the number 545454. You'll get that play absolutely free. And look, we won 8 of the last 10 on Thursday. So like I said in the pre-production email to you, man, I hope it carries over to Monday. So let's try to win this game for free tonight. We'll go from there.
All right, so text WIN, W-I-N, to 545454. You'll get tonight's game absolutely free. Packers and Saints as we head towards the end of the regular season. Now, the picks that you've given out on Jon and Jim have been hitting at a ridiculous clip. I know you had Penn State last week. I think you split because you also gave out Pittsburgh, Baltimore. That didn't hit. But over your last 10 weeks, you're 14-6, winning at a 70% clip with your free picks. So let's get to Christmas Day, which is just a loaded day for NFL fans. Used to be all about the NBA, but now we have a couple of marquee NFL games. Chiefs, Steelers is one of those. You're going to give out both of these Christmas Day games. Let's start with Chiefs and Steelers and your opinion in that one.
Well, first of all, thank you for the NFL for taking over Christmas Day,
Yeah.
so we don't have to watch 500 threes get chucked up in 5 NBA games. So this is pretty good that we get to watch 2 marquee matchups and 2 great head coaches in the first game between Andy Reid and Mike Tomlin. You know, you look at the Steelers, and they're known for their defense. Everyone knows that. But, you know, the last 5 weeks, they haven't played well defensively. You take out that home win against the Browns, they've allowed at least 24 points in 4 of their last 5 games. In the last 2 weeks against the Eagles, they couldn't get off the field. Last week, they couldn't get the stop against Baltimore. They're giving up points left and right now for a Steelers defense, and that don't bode well with Pat Mahomes coming to town. Now, the other issue is, you know, the Steelers desperately need the game. You know, they still control their own destiny in terms of winning the division, but they desperately need the game because, you know, if Baltimore wins out and Pittsburgh loses one of the last 2, Baltimore's going to win that division.
Right.
So I think you're going to get a really good Pittsburgh team overall, especially at home on Christmas Day. I just think there's going to be a lot of points scored. And 43.5, that's not overly a high total with, you know, Pat Mahomes on one side and a defense that's giving up on points on the other. So I think it's going to be an entertaining game. Hopefully there's no Netflix glitches like there was for that fight. And I'm going to go with you over 43.5 for the first game on Christmas Day.
All right, over in game 1, Chiefs Steelers. Again, if you want tonight's game, just text the word WIN, W-I-N, to 545454. You get it free on a recorded line. This is Saints Packers Monday Night Football. Text WIN to 545454. Then there's game 2. We've been talking about it today. Lamar Jackson, he's had great regular seasons before. He's won an MVP before. His year is ridiculous. Baltimore and Houston is game 2 on Christmas Day. What's your feeling there?
Yeah, going to go with Baltimore there. Look, Houston has the division locked up, and, you know, obviously the Tank Dell injury, that was just terrible to see and watch. And, you know, that just, I don't care who you are. You know, we say, oh, you know, they're professional athletes. You know what? They're human beings first. And, you know, that just took a lot of air out of them, you know, in their last game there. And I just think it's going to be very hard for them. They know they have a home playoff game. They've already won that division. Baltimore still could win that division, as we just spoke about with Pittsburgh. I think you're going to get a great version of Baltimore. They're the better football team. They create more problems for Houston than even Kansas City did because, you know, Pat Mahomes last week couldn't really run with the ankle. Well, you're not going to have that issue with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry there. So, it's really a two-headed monster that Houston's going to have a hard time stopping. And then offensively, C.J. Stroud, had a great rookie year. He has not looked the part. Now, obviously, he hasn't had as much help, but I just think Baltimore is better on both sides of the ball. You're paying a little bit of a number there. 4.5, 5 right now. It's not a cheap price on the road on a holiday game, but Baltimore, and at the end of the day, game. So, we'll take Baltimore, and I think they'll come by at least 7 points.
My Baltimore laid the points again in that second game. Next win, 5-4, 5-4, 5-4. You get it for absolutely free. Saints and Packers. What's your feeling in general, Chris? I'm curious. The expanded playoff, obviously the games are all blowouts. Are you in favor of the expanded playoff overall? Just didn't like the way the committee went about the process to set up the games? Or what's your feeling on it?
I love the expanded process.
Yeah, me too.
Idiots that choose the teams. I mean, this was so easy. I don't care that Indiana was 11-1. I don't care. They didn't beat anyone, and the one time they had to show up was against Ohio State, and they got killed in that game. So why would the outcome be any different than what it was? And then I've been screaming about SMU for weeks. They had no business being in that game. Alabama and Ole Miss, and even you can make an argument for South Carolina should have been in this thing. And it's just, you can't say, a team went 11-1. They're better than the 10-2 team, or 10-2 team is better than the 9-3 team. You have to look at the totality of who they played. And these guys in the CFP, they never do that, ever. So I think the 12 teams is great. I just think they got to pick it better. And I also believe this nonsense for like Arizona State getting a bye and Boise State getting a bye is ridiculous. Give me the top 12 teams. 1, 2, 3, 4 get the bye, whoever they are. None of this won a division or won a conference. Who cares? Okay, the Mountain West stinks. So I just think if they tweak it that way, I think it could be really good.
It's interesting you say that, though, real quick, because you're right. Because in the NCAA tournament, March Madness, it's like you could have a 22-10 team as like a 3 seed, and you could have like a 30-3 team, but out of like the Ohio Valley Conference, it's like a 13 seed. Like, it's not solely based on sheer number of wins. It is interesting how enamored the committee has been, even in the 4-team era, now into the 12-team era. It feels like there's like you have to have a very few number of losses, or they just won't consider your overall body of work. But what if you're playing 8-10 quote unquote tough teams and someone else is playing one tough team?
And that's a great point. You look at with March Madness, those guys actually do a really good job picking 68 teams or however many there's going to be this year. I think it might expand. And then you got these schleps from the CFP doing this, and they just screw it up every year. Like last year, there is no way. I know there was only 4 teams and it was different, but there is no way Georgia should have been left out of that thing. They should have figured it out. And because Georgia probably was the best team in the country last year, and they get left out. And then what do? They go beat FSU by 1,000 points. Now, FSU didn't have their team playing, but this is what happened. So I think they screwed it up again this year. But, next week, I think we get some fascinating matchups. I think Georgia, Notre Dame, with Georgia's quarterback being out, that's going to be a good one. And then the Rose Bowl, which I don't know how we get that in the quarterfinals, but it is what it is. So Ohio State and Oregon in the quarterfinal Rose Bowl should be a great game.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We're going to catch up again. Are we doing it again next Monday, Chris? Is that
next Monday.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to do it again next Monday. Again, do you have any opinions before you go, Chris, just on bowl games in general? I mean, maybe outside of the playoff, thoughts on how to play these games, because there's a number of them between now and, the next week and a half.
All right, I'm going to give you guys a gift, but it's not a bowl game.
Okay.
Be careful with the bowl games because you got to look at the opt-outs and transfer portal kids. Just so you guys know, transfer portal kids are allowed to play. So they're in the transfer portal and they can't play. No, that's a false statement going on right now. But here, you guys want a gift from a New Yorker? Here you go. Indianapolis is going to annihilate the Giants on Sunday. You can't bet enough on that game. They are going to kill them. That spread is 8 right now. I'm telling you right now, I know the Giants inside and out. They're going to win that game 37-10. I'm giving you the final score. They're going to kill them. So that is my Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah holiday gift. Indianapolis is going to kill the Giants on Sunday.
Absolutely love it. Free for our listeners. And again, if you want tonight, okay, Saints Packers Monday Night Football from Chris Hodge, 8-2. the last 10 times he's joined us, whether it's been Thursday night or Monday night. All you need to do is text the word WIN, W-I-N, to 545454. That's free for you. Recorded line. Packers, Saints. Text WIN to 545454. Chris, thank you for everything over the last year. Well, we're actually going to have you on before New Year's, but we're looking forward to next Monday. Merry Christmas to you and your fam, and we'll do it again next week, all right?
Yes, to all your listeners, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Thank you guys for always having me on.
All right, there we go. Chris Hodge taking Vegas. And again, if you want it tonight, text WIN to 5454. The wrap is coming up next. Mark Ziegler from the UT joins us at 5:30. It's Jon and Jim. All right, if you missed our conversation with Paul Garrison, East Village Times on San Diego State, adding a couple of quarterbacks over the last few days. Jaden Denegal, transfer from the University of Michigan out of Southern California. Coach Emmanuel Jr., transfer from Central Michigan. Dad played in the NFL, but Emmanuel great. That's that. If you missed that conversation, we have it for you at 5 p.m. Plus, Mark Ziegler on the Aztecs basketball crazy weekend with travel and their win over Cal. Mark will join us live at 5:30. We typically get to the wrap a little earlier in the show. By the way, do we have Brent's back page today?
Yeah, we'll have half of one at least.
We'll have at least half of a back page from Brent.
I'll half-ass it like the usual person that does it.
That's perfect. We usually get to the wrap earlier in the 4 o'clock hour, but let's get to it here.
It's time for The Wrap, presented by Sombrero Mexican Food. Check out their website at sombreromex.com.
Which lower seeded team is most likely to win a college football playoff quarterfinal game?
I think, and this is probably some bias just because of how much we've seen them and how much we've talked about them, I think it's Boise over Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl. But now they're a significant underdog. It's like 10 or 11 points, but they're in the West. I think they'll have a lion's share, no pun intended, of the crowd because they're in the West. They got to be so excited for this opportunity coming off a bye. So if nothing else, I would think they'd have 55% of the crowd. They've never lost in the Fiesta Bowl. They're 3-0. Now Penn State has never lost in the Fiesta Bowl. They're 7-0. But I don't know, a well-rested Boise team that's only lost was by 3 points in Eugene to Oregon with Ashton Genty playing in the West. Yeah, I would say that. Now, Georgia's without their starting quarterback, so maybe it's Georgia against Notre Dame because Carson Beck is out. I mean, shoot, maybe it's Ohio State against Oregon. They nearly won in Eugene this year, too. So I think you could make a compelling case for probably, what's the 4-5 matchup, Brent? The Arizona State. Oh, shoot. Arizona State's an underdog, aren't they? To Texas?
Yeah, they should be.
Yeah, what are the betting lines in the college football playoff? It's actually Arizona State. No, but Arizona State. See, this is confusing because we just said which of the lower seeded teams, right? Penn State's the lower seeded team.
Well, see, that's the thing that got confusing when me and Jim were talking about it on Friday. Because in your head, because we were talking about how, Oregon for being the number one seed, they would not have the easiest route because, they'd have to play Ohio State if they want. But I said, that just sounds weird because you're just saying it in your head. But if you actually look at the seeding, if everything plays out the way it's supposed to, they are playing the lower seed. It just feels weird to say Ohio State's like the lowest seed that's left.
Let me re-clarify. Because here's the deal. Boise's plus 11 as a higher seed. Arizona State's plus 14 as a higher seed. Oregon's, is this right? Is Oregon plus 2.5 as the 1 seed? And Georgia is minus 1.5 as the higher seed. The point is, 3 of the 4 higher seeds are dogs. That's all you need to know about how they need to reseed this thing or get this right in 2025. Anyway, out of all those games, the most likely lower seed to win is Ohio State. They're favored as the 8 against the overall top seed that hasn't lost this year. And you can make an argument for any of these games. It's confusing. Next question.
Which Christmas Day NFL game are you looking most forward to?
So those are the 2 games that we just talked about here with Chris Hodgson taking Vegas. They are really good games. You've got Kansas City, Pittsburgh in game 1, and you've got Baltimore, Houston in game 2. I'll say definitely Chiefs Steelers. I mean, the Steelers, like Chris said, can't afford to slip up to win the division. And Kansas City's Kansas City. They've won the last 2 Super Bowls, and they only have 1 loss this year. And I think it should be a good game. So I'll go with Chiefs and Steelers in the opener of the Netflix doubleheader. What about you?
I'm going to watch basketball.
You're going to watch basketball over the Netflix NFL games?
It'd be one thing if the Bears are playing in one of the games, but I have to watch the Chiefs every weekend because that's what's always on Paramount Plus, and I don't have cable or anything. So it's just like, oh, hey, I can watch the Chiefs again, or I could just watch Christmas movies or something. So I'll probably just watch Christmas movies.
It is weird to be playing on a Wednesday, but they can do this because these teams all played on Saturday. So it's kind of like Sunday, Thursday, but Saturday, Wednesday. I think Chiefs Steelers is likely a good game in Pittsburgh. I wouldn't be surprised if Baltimore, Houston It was a good game as well.
I think I'll be more entertained by the possible technical glitches that are going to happen
from Netflix, or during the Dunk the Halls Mickey and Minnie Spurs Knicks game.
I have the feeling that Dunk the Halls is going to go smoother than the live Netflix sports. It's anything like the Tyson Paul fiasco.
Next question.
Oh, this is an easy one. Who wins tonight's Packers-Saints game on Monday Night Football?
It will be shocking if the Packers lose at home tonight. Now, again, weather isn't a huge factor. It appears to be cold, but it's not like it's snowing and crazy windy. What's the temperature in Green Bay, Wisconsin? It can't be hot. I was just out east. It was cold. So it's going to be, 20 degrees?
That's 31.
All right, 30 degrees. So the temperature isn't a huge factor. It maybe is a factor, but it's not a huge factor. They're just the better team, and they're huge favorites tonight. They're playing on Monday Night Football at home. So I think
14-point favoriits.
Yeah, I think Packers win big. I don't know if they cover 14, but I think Packers win by 2 scores.
I think they will. New Orleans is down to like their third string quarterback among other positions. So yeah, they should.
Yeah, Packers should win big. Next question.
Will the Padres make a big move before the season?
Right, they're going to make
a little one,
moves.
big one.
They're going to make moves. They need to address catcher and left field and the back of the rotation. Moves are coming. The question is, how sizable will the move be? And yes, it's been quiet, and yes, it's been slow, and yes, they have payroll issues, but they also have AJ Preller as their general manager, and it's very rare for him in any calendar year not to make some type of splash, and I do think he'll do it again. Now, I think he's more likely to do it via trade than via free agency. You just look at the price tags and the financial issues they're up against. I just don't see $21 million deals for Walker Buehler or $25 million per year for Showman. I don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I am, truthfully, for Padres fans. But I think trades are coming. Now, I wouldn't be shocked if they had to move one of these key veteran pieces like Dylan Cease or Luis Ariz or even a Jake Cronenworth to maybe give them some flexibility. But I think if they move Dylan Cease, that's a big move. Now, it's not necessarily the move you're looking for. If they trade Luis Ariz, I think that's a big move. Again, I don't know if it's the move that you're looking for. But yeah, I'd be very surprised if they just went, budget catcher, budget left fielder, internal with their 5th starter, and then just said, hey, let's play baseball and let's see if we can win 93 games. That would surprise me. I don't think that's the way AJ Preller has typically operated. Now, you would have thought they would have been a little more active than they've been to this point. They haven't done anything. I mean, this season ended over 2 months ago and they haven't done anything. Now, Roki Sazaki's the other chip. I mean, that's obviously as big of a move as they could probably make this offseason, and maybe we're all waiting on that. We're only now 3 weeks out from January 15th. So just over 3 weeks out from January 15th, he's already been posted. He's already met with teams. Jim talked about this last week. He's been meeting with teams in Los Angeles. We haven't seen anything official on the Padres, but it would be a shocker if he didn't meet with the Padres. So whether it's Sasaki or a trade or two, I'd be very surprised if AJ Preller didn't make a quote-unquote big move between now and the start of the regular season.
They're pretty much just holding pat and just sitting down and waiting for the Roki sweepstakes to be over.
I think so.
That's pretty much all it is. It's, they're kind of just putting all their eggs in one basket. And I kind of joked last week that I just hope that they have a backup plan just in case, opposed to just sit there and just be like, oh, okay, our offseason strategy is Roki Sasaki. Okay, well, what if we don't get him? Our offseason plan is to get Roki Sasaki.
But what if you don't get him?
And that's. I also said too that I think it makes a big difference that the free agent signing period, granted it picked up this weekend a little bit, has been slow. Because if the Padres had to sit there and, we know they need a catcher, first base, left field, all that. If they had to sit here all weekend and just watch, first baseman after catcher go off the board, then they might be inclined to speed it up a little bit and say, hey, we can't just sit around and, do nothing. But nothing's going on in free agency. So it's afforded them that luxury of patience, really.
I'm all for them using that strategy if they land Sasaki. If we look back and on January 16th, he's announced as a Padre and that's their only move, they say, well, okay, it now makes sense. But if we look up January 16th, we're like Texas Rangers, LA Dodgers, Chicago White Sox. That's comical, but he's met with them. then you're going to feel a little bit different or differently about the Padres offseason. All right, Paul Garrison joined us earlier from the East Village Times. The Aztecs have added 2 transfer quarterbacks. You'll learn more about both of them on the other side. Plus, Mark Ziegler from the UT will join us at 5:30. The Aztecs basketball team had a crazy travel weekend, but also picked up a big win over Cal. They've got a massive game against Utah State on Saturday. We'll break that all down. It's hour 4 of Jon and Jim. It comes your way next. Yeah, we'll get back to that conversation on the Padres, their direction. Coming up at 5:15, Mark Ziegler from the UT is going to join us at 5:30. What a weekend for San Diego State with the planes, trains, automobiles. Barely got to San Jose in time to play Cal. Then they got there and they blew the doors off the Golden Bears. Now they have a big one with Utah State coming up on Saturday at 3 p.m. right here on San Diego Sports 760. So he'll join us at 5:30. We'll have Brent's back page. Jim is off today. We're off, by the way, tomorrow and Wednesday for Christmas Eve and Christmas, then back Thursday and Friday for you here on San Diego Sports 760. But if you missed it earlier, Paul Garrison, East Village Times, does an amazing job covering San Diego State football and basketball. Joined us because the Aztecs have added quarterbacks and more via the portal. And the first player we asked him about was a Michigan transfer quarterback, Jaden Denegal, who's out of Southern California, and how Paul thinks he may fit into Sean Lewis's offense.
Well, happy holidays. Yeah, with Denegal, I think, everything that you said is spot on. There's a little bit of just the unknown because he hasn't played a lot of college snaps. But he was an unbelievable prep guy. He's huge. I think the way that he fits is, he has the ability to make every throw that Sean Lewis would want in his offense. I mean, it's a guy who, as they're looking to stretch the field vertically, stretch it horizontally, should be able to do that incredibly well. And I think the other piece of it is he's a little bit of a dual threat. I think definitely his arm is better than his legs, but I think defenses are going to have to take him seriously as far as how he's going to be able to run the football. And I think the other real big positive is he's old. He's been around a college football program for many years, going to be an upperclassman. And I think that bodes well for, just his ability to kind of hit the ground running and make a big impression in fall camp.
So you have Denegal from Michigan, and then you have Bert Emanuel Jr., who we saw at Central Michigan this year, the son of a longtime NFL player. We've joked with Jim about Bert Emanuel. Jim has no idea who Bert Emanuel is. I'm like, Jim, you don't know football. But anyway, his son, Bert Emanuel Jr., is a really talented kid. Now, he's dealt with injuries. They haven't necessarily solely used him at quarterback, but he has played some quarterback at CMU. What can you tell us about his skill set and how he may fit in?
I think the part with him is that, you mentioned the limited opportunities that he had at Central Michigan. But what he did with those limited opportunities is nothing short of spectacular. Sean Lewis would talk about, how important it is to try to get explosive plays. And that's all that Bert Emanuel has done, in covering the Central Michigan San Diego State game. All the fans and the media up there, they wanted him to play and be the starter in that game and get all the stuff, all of the snaps, and not Joe Lavis, who ended up being the quarterback that led Central Michigan to a win there. But it's just somebody who brings explosive plays. I think the way he fits into the offense is very similar, obviously, to Jaden Denegal, just because you are looking for somebody who can force the defense to have to account for the QB in the run game. Somebody who, if given a little bit of space, can turn something that should be small, that most QBs would make a small gain, into a big one. I think that, you look at some of the passing numbers, and I think with the way that the offense is and the offense runs, I think that they can coach these guys into having, a higher completion percentage. In the case of Emmanuel, and that we've seen in college so far, through, the screen games or, quick, reads and things of that nature. So they're very similar. I think that, again, he's another guy who is very big, and I think, can handle kind of the beating that QBs take and are going to take in any system. And it's just an exciting day, an exciting time, when you're looking at what they're going to be in 2025.
Yeah, it's interesting comparing the quarterback room from 2024 to 2025, and that's probably not completely fair because you don't know what's going to happen in 2025, but you do have probably a little more college experience in there, although they had some of that in 2024 as well. Of course, Danny O'Neill was the one that made a lion's share of the starts for Sean Lewis. All right, Paul Garrison, East Village Times, is with us right now on Jon and Jim. Speaking of 2024 to 2025, how would you compare their emphasis right now on bolstering line play compared to what they did last offseason in the portal? It feels like there's been a huge emphasis on the offensive and defensive lines, and even like tight ends, blocking tight ends that they've added here in the last few days as well.
Yeah, I think when you look at the way where San Diego State is in kind of the stratosphere of college football, I think the portal is never going to be a net positive for them as far as adding depth if they're unable to keep the players from their current roster in San Diego. Last offseason with Sean Lewis coming in for the first time, a lot of those starters went and left and went to, Power Five conferences and things of that nature. And a lot of that offensive line that, they lost a lot of players, Brent and Richard Dixon went to Florida. Cade Bennett goes to TCU. Even Tom Mirabella, who was a backup, he ends up going to UC Davis, and then others, and they were able to replace, but they weren't quite as good as the guys that they had lost. This year, they've done a good job being able to keep their guys in house. And so now the players that they've been able to add are true additions. They're not necessarily guys that you're just bringing in to replace. And so I think there has been that emphasis, and they're looking for competitive depth. And I think that, you look at kind of the versatility of the guys that they brought in, especially on the offensive line, being able to play, kind of those guard or tackle positions. Defensive line is pretty much coming back, and, it'd be real interesting to see, with the new ruling with JC guys, I think that would probably potentially give a guy like Tupu Alualu another year of eligibility, because he played time in the JC, and what that looked like for him and where he would want to continue his career is a question that is just being asked today with the NCAA's ruling. But I think that overall, not only are these guys a year older who was able to stay in the system, but they're now able to supplement those guys and not necessarily have to replace them. And I think that's a huge difference between the 2 years.
Yeah, that's really good insight. Paul Garrison, East Village Times, with us right now on Jon and Jim. I don't know the right word here. I don't think exploit is the word I'm looking for, but I think it makes sense in this context, which is like, how is the staff exploiting their Southern California location on the recruiting trail, specifically in the portal? Because I see someone like Christian Washington, who starred at Helix, and we talked about Jaden Danigal, who's out of Southern California, not San Diego, but Los Angeles area. How much of an advantage is that, so to speak, that they can cast that wide net of players that may have left for other pastures, but they can come back home within that 100-mile radius?
Yeah, I think you look at a lot of these guys, and going and looking in that Southern California, as you described, is exactly what they're trying to be able to do. And I think, as we've talked about with the transfer portal, with NIL, it kind of, it changes the way I think relationships are built in college football, and it makes it to less of an amateur sport, and it makes it more of kind of that professional, this is about business, which I think has the other effect of making, the people that you really know and that can count on kind of shine a little bit brighter. And I think these kids really want to be closer to their family, want to be closer to their community, their support networks. And, those, maybe they could, in years past, they could find that in other spots because they were forced to be in one place for a long period of time. And, not only are kids choosing to transfer out, but schools are saying, like, you haven't made enough progress, so you need to go find somewhere else as well. And so you kind of have a little bit of that distrust, I think, that's there, and a little bit of more of that business-like mentality at the school itself. And so I think the opportunity to play in front of the people that, really support you is really good. And I think it's incredibly smart for the Aztecs, not only to reach out to guys that are going to be close and maybe be able to tap into that, but, everything is about, money, and everything is about the price of scholarships. And if you can get guys that are in state versus out of state, and being able to do all of that, I think it just is a win-win for everybody. And the staff has seemed to be doing a good job of targeting those guys that are close to the campus and trying to make them Aztecs.
Paul, before you go, because I believe you've written on this, but what's the impact of the new DC, the defensive coordinator change from Eric Schmidt to Rob Orich? What's that impact in your opinion?
It obviously remains to be seen, but in my opinion, I think it's a great hire. I think you can look at a lot of different factors. Obviously, Rob Orich did a great job in Idaho in taking them from, being I heard the interview you guys had with him. He talked about the same thing, like taking a defense that had given up over 30 points a game all the way down to 20 in 2 years. There's a lot of things to point to, but I think for me, the part of it that I find the most interesting and the most fascinating is how he was the choice of the players on the defense. And, that Trey White and Chris Johnson and Tana Latuli, like they made their voice known inside of the Fowler Athletic Center, that they wanted Rob Orge to be the guy to be hired. And I think that when I asked Rob Arch about it, he talked about keeping that close to his heart and his appreciation for these guys, for them doing that and stepping up in that regard. And I think that, the work that they're doing is they're kind of working to prove each other correct. That not only that the faith that the players had in Rob Orge, that he's going to be able to coach in a way that's going to show that they were right, but the players are going to try to prove with their play that they made the right decision as well. And I think that intangible of just working a little bit harder and kind of putting themselves on the line for each other, I think can make a really positive and a big impact. And I think the other part of it that's really important is they're not starting from scratch in year 2 with the system. Rob Orch saw everything that Eric Schmidt did, and he's able to build off it as opposed to laying a brand new foundation.
Paul, really appreciate it, man. Thank you for all your insight for our listeners over the last year plus here as we've reached the holiday season, and with Christmas and New Year's coming. I'm sure we'll catch up early in 2025, but I've really enjoyed having you on throughout the course of the year and previous years, and looking forward to doing it again coming up in 2025. So Merry Christmas, and thank you, Paul.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and you're the man. Thank you.
All right, we always get great insight from Paul Garrison, and if you missed it, that was from earlier today on Jon and Jim. Mark Ziegler will join us at 5:30. The Aztecs basketball team is 8-2. The metrics are trending up. They survived a crazy travel weekend, made it to San Jose and back, and they've got a big one coming up Saturday against Utah State. So Mark Ziegler at 5:30. But on the other side, the impact of the chairman change for the San Diego Padres. What does it mean for 2025 and beyond? It's Jon and Jim. Ziegler from the UT will join us at 5:30. Wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. We're off for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, but back Thursday and Friday right here on San Diego Sports 760 and Jon and Jim. Looking forward to speaking with Mark because, yeah, it's the holidays, but the Aztecs are coming off a big win over Cal and have a huge game coming up Saturday against Utah State. The only team in the Mountain West with better, quote-unquote, metrics than the Aztecs right now, the Utah State Aggies with only one loss this year. Their lone loss at home to UC San Diego. But they followed that up this weekend with a victory on the road in Moraga over St. Mary's. So Mark Ziegler is going to join us coming up at 5:30. We were touching on earlier, obviously, what this change means for the Padres. The change being just the chairperson change. And I don't think it's overly significant. I think the significant piece is this. The Seidlers said they weren't selling the team, and they're not selling the team. Peter Seidler said at one point within the last few years before his passing that the team's going to be in his family's name for generations. That apparently is going to be what's going to be, that apparently is the case because John Seidler, his brother, is taking over as the chairman. Now, the spending prowess of Peter Seidler over like 2021 and 2022, those days are likely over. They don't have the same TV revenue. Their revenue and their payroll, not their revenue, but their payrolls come down significantly, obviously, over the last couple of years. They can still win with those payrolls. They can win. I mean, last year they won 93 games. Why have they been quiet this offseason? Does it have to do with changing the chairman from Eric Katsenda to John Seidler? Does it have to do with Roki Sasaki? Does it have to do with moving one of these veteran pieces like Luis Ariz or Dylan Cease or Jay Cronenworth before they can make more sizable moves? I don't know the answer to that, but I think at the end of the day, the good news is the team's staying in the Seidler name. The bad news is they're never going to be top 3 in payroll. And again, the other side of that coin, the other good news is you can still win with the 12th or 14th highest payroll, as they proved to us in 2024.
I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference between John and
Peter.
The people. Well, not between John and Peter, but John and the group or whoever was Katsenda, who's been running it for the last year and a half or so. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be kind of like that. I think it was the Who was, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Yeah. I think it's going to be kind of one of those situations to where if you're thinking that Seidler is back in charge now, that, we're going to bust out the check, but no, I think it's going to be more along the line of what we were or have been doing.
Yeah, and then there's you ask yourself why. This was written by Ken Rosenthal today. He had a notebook on free agency and specifically about a veteran first baseman, 38-year-old Carlos Santana. And there's a line in the article that says, Santana said both New York teams, Detroit and Arizona, also were in the mix, while San Diego and Texas had asked him to wait. And then are they waiting? I don't think that has anything to do with Roki Sasaki. I think if you're waiting on a first baseman, then are you waiting to potentially move Luis Ariz or Jay Cronenworth? Yeah, to free up money. And again, you're not going to acquire a Carlos Santana if you are going to keep both Jay Cronenworth and Luis Ariz. It sounds like they still have moves to make. Not sounds like. We know they have moves to make. I think they still have sizable moves to make. I really do believe that. And I think some of it has to do with Sasaki. Some of it maybe has to do with ownership and this chairman change. I think some of it has to do with the fact that they need to get their books in order. Dennis Lin, we talked about this off the top of the show, said they're $40 million higher than essentially they were in 2024. Why? Because some of these numbers have gone up. The arbitration numbers on Dylan Cease and Luis Ariz and Michael King, those numbers have gone up. If you want to bring back Jurickson Profar, well, he made $1 million last year. All of a sudden, he's going to be making 10 or 15 or more $1 million in 2025. So it's about getting the house in order. Potentially, a year ago, it was move Juan Soto, we'll figure out the rest. You freed up all that money. You got the Michael Kings of the world back. You got the Kyle Higashiokas back. And maybe it's not as easy this time around. What can you get for Dylan Cease? I think a lot. What can you get for Luis Ariz? I think a decent amount. What can you get for Jay Cronenworth? I don't think that much. But maybe you need to move one of those chips before you continue on with your offseason.
Yeah, they're in the boat now to where I'm gonna throw another movie line that you won't understand at you. But Jeff Goldblum had a line in Jurassic Park where he's all the scientists when came to making the dinosaurs is They only thought of if they could. They never stopped to think of if they should. And that's kind of what I'm feeling now is they're only talking about, oh, yeah, we could trade Luis Ariz, we could trade Dylan Cease, but should we?
Yeah, and that's the question. I mean, it was like a year ago. It's like they could absolutely have moved Juan Soto. In theory, they could have kept him, but they wouldn't have added Michael King. They wouldn't have had more payroll flexibility. They wouldn't have been able to make some of the additions they made, maybe some of the trades, like for Dylan Cease or for Luis Ariz later in the offseason or into the season. So all these factors come into play. I think at the end of the day, the good news is the team stays in the Seidler name. That's very good news. I think San Diegans, by and large, are obviously, I mean, Peter Seidler is one of the most beloved owners in the history of a professional sports team in San Diego. But unfortunately, Peter Seidler's not coming back. And unfortunately, they're not going to spend the way they used to spend. But they proved last year they can win without spending like that. They're going to have to prove it again in 2025.
I think, too, it goes against that rumor that they're going to sell the team and all that other stuff, too. So,
yeah. 100%. All right, Mark Ziegler from the UT on the Wild Aztec basketball weekend with the crazy travel, the win over Cal. We'll look ahead to Utah State on Saturday. It's Jon and Jim.
This report is sponsored by the Jim Petrell Real Estate Team. The Aztec basketball team is back at it this Saturday when they host Utah State. Our pregame coverage will start right here at 2 p.m. and Tip with Uncle Teddy will be shortly after 3 o'clock right here on your home for the Aztecs, San Diego State 760. In Major League Baseball free agency news, Walker Buehler and the Red Sox came to terms on a one-year deal worth $21 million. And Week 16 in the NFL wraps up tonight. Currently, the Packers are hosting the Saints on Monday Night Football. With about 8 minutes to go in the first quarter, it is 7-0 Green Bay. Would you like to know what your home would sell for today? Get a simple text message with your home's value by texting your address to 855-600-6000. You'll get no phone call, just a text. Jim Petrell has the buyers. Simply text your address to 855-600-6000.
Hi, John and Jim back with you as we approach Christmas. We're off on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, back Thursday, Friday, and of course, it has basketball. Saturday really is a showdown. San Diego State, Utah State, 3 p.m. from the VA House, pregame coverage at 2. A huge early conference game for both teams that we're going to get into right now with Mark Ziegler of the UT, but there's much more to get into as well. Just a wild travel weekend, a good result for San Diego State men's basketball. But, Mark, always appreciate your time. Mark Ziegler, of course, covers the beat for San Diego State men's basketball. And you've covered Olympics and you've covered the Aztecs for over a decade, and you've made a career out of this. Have you ever really experienced a weekend like this? I know you had your own travel issues. San Diego State had its own travel issues. This has got to be a pretty unique experience overall.
Yeah, it's certainly a little bit unusual. And you know what's funny is, I mean, being in the Mountain West, you'd expect in the last 10 years to have had some complete nightmare, snowstorm, blizzard, whiteout, stranded on the side of the road, or slept in an airport, and really haven't. Been really, really lucky. I'm just waiting for the year that it happens. And you know, of all places, you think just going to San Jose, I mean, how hard could that be? There's a zillion flights a day. But one thing led to another, and next thing you know, they're looking at this thing going, are we going to even get there? And they did, and you know, pulled it together in the second half and won a game. But you know, these things can be, they can work both ways on a team. They can have sort of a cumulative effect, just, you know, the grind of spending so much time traveling, catch up with you later, or they could really have a uniting effect on a team and bring a team closer together. And so we'll kind of see how this goes as the season wears on.
It's interesting you say that, because I heard the post-game press conference. You asked some questions about chartering, and I heard the response from Nick Boyd, and you've heard this routinely from Nick, about one of the reasons he chose San Diego State was like, you know, I felt as if, you know, I almost needed to be humbled a little bit. I didn't need all the flashy things. I got a little too comfortable maybe in my previous spot. Now, he wasn't at the power level playing at FAU, but he had a lot of success, obviously, at FAU. I know we've talked about the chartering before. San Diego State's one of the most successful programs in the country that probably doesn't charter with much regularity. Specific to this weekend, what impact would it have had? Let's say they had access to a chartered plane, but if the issue was weather, what impact would chartering have had this weekend?
Oh, it would have made it so much easier.
Okay.
And just because, so in San Diego, one of the things that makes chartering hard would actually have been an advantage this time. And what makes chartering hard in San Diego is there's no charter companies based in San Diego.
Okay.
And so they got to fly a plane in from somewhere else. But in this case, it would have been very easy. Instead of flying into San Diego International or Carlsbad, which was experiencing fog problems, they could have just gone to Gillespie Field or Brown Field, somewhere where there was no fog, turned the bus around and went there, got on the plane and flew to San Jose. And it wouldn't have been an issue. Could have maybe even shot Friday night in the arena, definitely shot Saturday in the arena, and just not had all that uncertainty. I mean, you look at last season, and last season they had two really rough travel days. They were both coming back from games, one coming back from New Mexico, one coming back from Boise. Both took, you know, close to 10 hours, were two flights, a long time in airport, questions whether they were even going to get back. And then you look at the end of the season, and they kind of hit a wall late in the season and lost 3 of their last 5. They lost that home game to Boise that would have, you know, that would have given them an undefeated home record for first time in school history. And so you wonder if these kind of things add up. That's what coaches who do charters say. It's the cumulative effect, particularly in a tough travel conference. So that's why I say we'll see how this goes. If they have another one, or two more, maybe it adds up towards the end of the season, or maybe it doesn't.
They also had Mark Ziegler of the UT is with us right now, and Jon and Jim. It's a good point. I mean, even a year ago, when they were in the NCAA tournament and chartering, they had a crazy turnaround, as you recall, from Sunday night in Spokane to Thursday, essentially Pacific afternoon time in Boston, where they came back to San Diego, then went to Boston, which was a really crazy, 48-hour window for the Aztecs there late in the year. Here's a question that I wanted to pose to you because I'm just curious to get your thoughts on it, because I heard what Brian Dutcher had to say about chartering, saying that, listen, we only have so much in the budget. We don't want to spend unnecessarily. If it's fully necessary, we appreciate having, the legs of chartering, but we don't do it each and every game. Here's a question for you. If they had another $250,000 in the budget, so to speak, would they put it to chartering or would they put it to NIL?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In this NIL era, I mean, you got to get competitive in NIL. I think they would. I think they certainly would like a few more charters being in the Mountain West. I think, once again, in the Pac-12, things ease up a little bit in some of the markets. Because you're not going to be going into the mountains as many times. You're not going to have to go to Laramie anymore. That's an automatic, they get 4 charter legs or 2 round trips. That's automatic. Those 2 of them are burned on Wyoming. That's why they don't like playing in Wyoming. It's no offense to people of the state of Wyoming. It's just that it's really hard to get to, and they got to burn half their charter legs on that one trip. So they won't have to do that anymore. And so I think the chartering, and it'll be a shorter conference schedule. So I think the chartering issue maybe isn't quite as big in 2 years when they get into that. But I think, they would spend it. That's sort of the one last thing that they don't have. They have everything else. They've bumped up assistant salaries, not as much as power conferences, but they're competitive. Brian Dutcher finally got a bump to, closer to what he deserves, although a coach of his stature is probably making $4 or $5 million a year. And they have a practice facility, they have an arena, and they have a lot of other amenities. But this is the one thing they're kind of lacking. And it's so hard to quantify, right? You just don't know if it really makes a difference or if it doesn't. But in the NCAA tournament, the way it is, I mean, every game matters, every point matters. And you're just playing with fire that sooner or later it's going to come back and burn you.
Mark Ziegler from the UT with us right now on Jon and Jim. So from the San Diego State, program perspective, they couldn't ask for more than this, right? I mean, heading into the season, we always knew there was going to be potentially a high ceiling because of their youth, and we wanted to see what would happen as the season progressed. There's a lot of talent here. Maybe you could have argued there was a lower floor as well heading into the year, but they couldn't ask to be in a better spot, could they?
No, I don't think so. I mean, really, 8-2. The 2 losses are top 15 type teams. They have one for sure marquee win, and we'll see how Creighton does. Yeah. Creighton's kind of flailing around right now. I don't think they're an NCAA tournament team as we speak. But the UCSD win is looking a lot better than a lot of people projected. We'll see if Cal can turn things around. They have a lot of talent, but they haven't been able to win as much maybe as some expected. But yeah, all things considered, with a young team without Reese Waters, you take 8-2, and I think they're a little bit ahead of schedule in terms of developing a team that we thought we'd eventually see. I think we're seeing it now, a month or 2 ahead of schedule. So let's see if they can turn that into some victories. The one thing about the Mountain West schedule is the hardest road games. I think the 3 hardest road games on paper, at least, are at Boise, at New Mexico, at Nevada, are all in January. And you'd almost like it to be flipped, play those teams at home early, and then maybe on the road when you're more seasoned and you have developed a little bit, take your shot on the road with them. But they're going to get those games early. Let's see if they've developed enough to win 1 or 2 or 3 of those games. If they can get a couple of those games, they really could be off and running and have a strong second half and really be a contender for the Mountain West and maybe even run away with it. But that's going to be the big question. The next question for me is what happens at Boise on January 4th? What happens at New Mexico on January 11th, and then what happens a couple weeks later at Nevada?
Yeah, it's well said. Mark Ziegler from the UT with us right now on Jon and Jim. Now, you reported on Reese Waters. He's been in the boot since prior to the season. Again, the team overall is 8-2, but we know Reese Waters was their only preseason all-conference selection, and he was a huge piece of the puzzle, specifically in the first half last year for Brian Dutcher. You wrote on this before, listeners. What do you expect? What happens next with Reese Waters? Would you expect him to be on the floor this season for San Diego State or not?
I'm starting to think no, but you just don't know. If you just pull back and look at it and say, okay, his next scan's going to come, middle of January. And then you're going to need at least 3 weeks, I would think, maybe even 4, to really get into sort of game fitness. You're looking at early February, middle of February before he's really on the floor. There's a month left in the season. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But then you look and you see him. He's going on every road trip. He was there again this weekend. I mean, he could have been home with his family. They get a very short break for Christmas. I mean, but he wants to be with the team. And part of that tells me that maybe he's thinking that, you know what, let's just give this thing a go. We're having a good season. Maybe I can add to it. And so maybe he just doesn't know. And if Brian Dutch has kind of tried to tell him and try to get him in the mindset of it, let's wait until you get cleared. And if you get cleared, you make a decision then, because you'll have a better feeling of the time frame of when you're going to be back on the floor. Right now, you just don't know. I mean, you might get to the next scan and they might say, no, it's not quite healed yet. Still making progress, but it's not quite healed. Let's wait another 3 weeks. And then at that point, you're like, well, okay, the season's pretty much over. But until you get that clearance from the doctor, Brian Dutcher doesn't want him making a decision. And so we'll have to wait and see.
You also wonder, Mark, just thinking, I think you wrote on this too. It's like, this is his 5th college season. Now, he's not playing right now. And if he were to redshirt it, he'd have a chance to play again. But does he want to play a 6th season? Just in general, when you think about that, do you want to do that, or are you turning professional regardless? Are you going to play and pursue professional opportunities regardless in 2025, 26? I wonder what factor that has for him.
100%. And that could be part of it, is if he can get a month, 6 weeks out of the season, and he feels like, I'm going to get my undergraduate degree in May, and I'm done.
Right.
Well, you might as well just salvage what you can from this season and move on. And I think San Diego State obviously is going to be supportive either way. I mean, and I think as a fan, if he decides to come back next year, great. You've got a really big piece right now, you're going to have. And also as a fan, if he decides to play the season, man, I mean, this team's already really good. I mean, anything he adds is bonus. Maybe it really pushes him over the top and pushes him into a pretty high seed and Mountain West regular season championship, et cetera, et cetera. So I think both are positives for San Diego State.
One more, Mark, before you go, is just about the league in general. It was never going to be last year. They were never going to get 6 teams in the NCAA tournament. But there have been some really, discouraging non-conference results. There's been some good in there. Utah State clearly has been very good. San Diego State as well. But I guess the question is this: for San Diego State to have a chance to earn an at-large berth, what would you expect they would need to do in the league?
Well, I think now entering the league, given their metrics, took a big jump from the Cal game. I think they're right now, as we speak, they're in the tournament, no doubt about that. I'm not sure any other team in the league can say that, because they either don't have a marquee win or they have a bad loss or two. San Diego State doesn't have a bad loss and it had marquee wins. Those are just kind of the rough formula and the metrics now, and the ranking and and the national attention. I think they probably get a little bit more of a margin of error because they are San Diego State and what they've done in the tournament the last couple of years, and everyone else doesn't because of what they haven't done in the tournament. And so I think if they finish in the top 4, they're probably okay. I really think so, as long as they don't take some bad losses here. Now, again, there's a lot more landmines out there this year with a 20-game conference schedule, so you got to make sure you don't do that. But for the rest of the conference, a couple of those teams have work to do. I think some teams will separate themselves. I can't figure out Utah State. I watched the entire game against UCSD. They looked awful. They're absolutely awful, like a 6th place, 7th place Mount West team, paper tiger, and then they go in and beat St. Mary's. I'm not sure how great St. Mary's is this year, but still at the win at St. Mary's, that's impressive. And so we'll have to wait and see. But I think there's probably 5 teams, the upper half: Nevada, Boise State, New Mexico, San Diego State. Maybe UNLV can sneak in there, but I don't think they're a tournament team, and Utah State. So, I don't think all 5 of them are going to make it, but I think 2 and maybe on a good day 3 could.
Yeah, no, it's well said. Mark, appreciate it. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and I'll see you Saturday at Viejas Arena. Thanks as always for doing it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks,
Great
guys.
stuff from Mark Ziegler at the UT. We'll come back with Brent's back page with Jim off today. That's next on Jon and Jim. All right, final time here before Christmas. We're off for Christmas Eve. Christmas Day, we're back Thursday and Friday. Domestic basketball Saturday against Utah State at 3. Frequent coverage at 2. We hope it's a wonderful holiday season. Happy, safe, enjoyable with family, friends. And we're looking forward to talking San Diego sports with you later this week. And, of course, in 2025 as well. We're here next week, too. We're off for New Year's Day, but we are here live and local next week as well. Here on San Diego Sports 760. Jim will be back Monday. I'll be with you Thursday and Friday with Brent. All right, typically it's Jim's back page. Truthfully, Brent's back page is better, so let's get to it.
All right, we'll start. You drink Diet Coke, right?
I do.
Okay. Have you noticed at the store yellow bottle caps on Coke products lately?
No, I usually, if I'm drinking it, Brent, it would be in a can. I would never drink it in a plastic bottle. For some reason, I like the taste in a can.
I prefer cans too because it stays
Okay.
colder longer.
Yeah.
But typically when you buy like a bottle of Coke or Coke Zero or whatever, they'll have like a black, like the bottle cap will be black or red.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we have yellow bottle caps that have been popping up, and people have been kind of wondering, hey, Coke, what's the deal with the yellow bottle caps? And it turns out that what the yellow bottle caps signify is they're just letting people know that this is kosher for
So it's
passes.
it's not. It's for kosher for Paso, or it's just kosher in general, probably.
In general, but I think it's in relation to the holidays.
Okay,
because there's all that stuff that you can't eat. So if you see the yellow caps on Coke
that means
products,
it's kosher.
That means it's kosher. So
I never would have guessed that.
So you could drink it. I wouldn't have guessed it either. But that's what the yellow caps on Coke products mean, is that it's kosher. So feel free to drink it. You'll be okay. Do you know who Christopher Nolan is, John?
Christopher Nolan.
He's a director. He directed Oppenheimer.
So no, I don't.
Okay. He directed Oppenheimer. He did the Christian Bale Batman movies and Memento, and he's like one of the best directors there is today.
Okay.
Christopher Nolan and Universal Pictures today announced that Nolan's next film is going to be The Odyssey, which is going to be an adaptation of Homer's poem, The Odyssey, which is pretty much like Greek mythology.
Okay, not Bart
like
Simpson stuff. This is
no,
mythology.
No, not Homer Simpson. This is Greek mythology. Odyssey, it follows Greek hero Odysseus as he on his journey home after the Trojan War.
What are your thoughts on that? That's probably an interesting story to tell.
I always liked Greek mythology stuff.
Yeah.
You learn a lot of boring crap in school, and I always liked doing mythology stuff because it was something out of the ordinary. So I'm interested in that. The cast for the film so far already has Charlize Theron, Matt Damon, Tom Holland, that's Spider-Man, John, Anne Hathaway, Zendaya, I always say her name wrong.
So it's a big deal.
Yep. And Robert Pattinson, Batman and Spider-Man are in this movie, John.
Okay, wow.
So
but not as Batman and Spider-Man.
No, they're playing other people.
That'd be
obviously.
unique.
And I know you don't watch movies. Do you at least watch Christmas movies?
I've seen Elf, obviously.
Oh, okay. So you've seen Elf,
Yeah.
Charlie Brown Christmas.
Yeah.
That's technically not a movie, but
It's been a while.
Well, Entertainment Weekly did their top Christmas movies of all time. I agree with most of the movies on the list, just not the order of them.
So what's like the top 5 or 10?
Their top 5 is number 5 is How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Number 4 is Elf. Number 3 is A Charlie Brown Christmas. 2 is A Christmas Story. And their number 1 all-time Christmas movie is It's a Wonderful Life, which I hate.
Now, we're saying The Grinch, the cartoon.
Yes.
Okay, so 2 of those are kind of like short movies, right?
Yes, because Charlie Brown's like
Just
that too,
30 minutes. Okay, interesting. Good job with the back page. That was good. Very good. For our listeners, enjoy the holidays, Christmas Eve, everything that's coming up. Be safe. We're back with you Thursday at 2 p.m. on the 26th, talking hot stove, NFL, Aztec basketball. Getting ready for Saturday.
Hopefully the stove will be hot.
Hopefully the stove will be
fairly hot.
absolutely. All right. That was for Jim. He's not here. I'm John. Merry Christmas.